Hello, everyone, and welcome to September 14, 2023's Planning Commission hearing. I will call this hearing to order now at 1:01 p.m. Mrs. Barza, can we please have a roll call?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take roll call. Chair Bonderson?
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Balke is absent. Commissioner Boss?
Present.
Commissioner DeLuccio?
Here.
Commissioner Lodge?
Here.
Commissioner Wardlow?
Here.
And Commissioner Wiscombe?
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you as well. So let's move on to our preliminary matters, and we will start with any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements of ex-agenda items. Mr. Busk, do we have any of those?
Thank you, Chair. We have none.
All right. And next we will have, Mr. Busk, we'll have you tell us if there are any announcements or appeals today.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Just one announcement, which I had mentioned last week. There was a request for an emergency coastal development permit at 3405 Sea Ledge Lane and 3357 Cliff Drive. That permit was issued, and if you're interested, the paperwork's available on our website.
Great. Yes, I saw that. Thank you. We will move on to item 2C and take comments from members of the public pertaining to items that are not on today's agenda. Mrs. Sparza, do we have anyone in person or remote that would like to give a public comment?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. First, turning to in-person public comment. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on items not on today's agenda, that's general business items, please fill out a speaker slip in the back and turn it into staff. Not seeing any movement on that, so I'll turn to virtual. If there's anyone participating on Zoom who would like to speak on general business, again, that's items not on today's agenda, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and then we did not receive any general public comment. Bring correspondence, so back to the commission.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move on to our new item. This is item 3, and it is for a concept review for a proposed project located at 1529 State Street. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications that they need to disclose at this time? I see none. Thank you. We have project planner Megan Arciniega from the city here to give the staff presentation. Ms. Arciniega, the floor is yours. Are you ready to begin?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the public. I'm Megan Arciniega. I'm the project planner that has reviewed the development proposal at 1529 State Street, commonly known as the Cantwell's property. The project that's being proposed is a mixed-use building utilizing the city's average unit density incentive program. This is a program that we've had since 2016 that incentivizes adding additional units to the downtown area and the areas highlighted on the map, as well as the upper State Street area. The areas in dark red with hatching include higher density allowances, and then the outlying gold color, a little bit lower, the medium-high density allowances. It was a trial program that was intended to inform the city's permanent standards for multi-unit housing. And the ordinance has been amended a few times, last in September 2020. And then also we have additional amendments that are currently underway that will formalize these standards into our zoning ordinance multi-unit standards. As I already touched on, AUD, or average unit density incentive, just basically means higher densities allowed in the downtown area. But the idea is that the average size of all the units proposed is capped. So you're allowed some larger units with a mix of smaller units, provided that the average is under the set limit. These projects require project approval by the design review boards, either the Architectural Board of Review or the Historic Landmarks Commission, whichever applies. And then it also requires Planning Commission review of the larger projects, a conceptual review for the Planning Commission to speak on the project's merits in terms of consistency with the general plan. This feedback from your commission today will be then provided to the design review board, so in this case, Historic Landmarks Commission. So to just kind of outline that in a visual sense of the process, the idea is that projects that are proposed into this program that are on the larger lots come up with a conceptual design that are first presented to staff and the design review board, so HLC. Then it goes to the Planning Commission for concept review and comments. Those two comments, along with staff's comments, inform the formal application, and the applicant responds to them and develops their project design approval design. ABR HLC acts on that project design approval, either approving it or denying it, and then finally the details are fleshed out in the final design approval. As I mentioned today, the purpose of today's hearing is to get the Planning Commission's comments and recommendations by majority vote, namely on whether the proposed design and improvements are appropriate and the project's consistencies with the city's general plan, including goals and policies. So to get us situated today, here is the project site on the corner of West Arriaga Street and State Street in the downtown core at the Cantwell's Market property. Here you can see an aerial view. Across the street directly is the newly renovated El Prado Hotel. We have an existing condo mixed-use building surrounding the property, and you can see Alice Keck Park over to the top right of the screen. Here's the zoning overlay. So the city, this property sits well within the commercial general zone. And it's in the higher end, the commercial high-density designation area. It's at the end of that high-density designation. You can see in the dark red, and then up above it is the lighter kind of pink color. That's the medium-density designation. So it's at the end of that corridor. Here's the priority housing overlay that overlaps with the high-density, but this is the overlay that allows projects to build additional units if they're providing rental housing. So here's our site on the corner of Arriaga and State. As you can see, the property is currently made up of 2 buildings, one-story buildings, one tall one-story building and a shorter one, I believe 18 feet in height, and surface-level parking, 2 driveway entrances, or 1. Here's coming up State Street. Our property is on the left, so we can see the neighboring property that's built up to the lot line, and then this is the start of the Cantwell's Market, which is our subject property. There's coming around the corner. You can see the hotel across the street. This is a pretty wide section of State Street. We have Class 2 bike routes up and down, as well as bus stops, and you can see even B-cycle bike rental infrastructure. Here's coming around the corner on West Arriaga Street looking towards the mountains. As you can see, also I'll back up a little bit. When you're on State Street looking up, you always consistently see a peak of the mountains on this section of State Street, which is really special and nice. And it's a lot, in many ways, afforded by the wide street of State Street that's really preserved that view into the mountains. And then similarly along West Arriaga Street, you can see the views to the mountains as you're looking towards Alice Keck Park. Our property is over on the right. You can see the lower one-story building on the right, and then the Cantwell's Market beyond. And then here's a picture of the lot line condition along that West Arriaga Street property line. It's currently a 0 setback requirement, so either property could develop up to the property line. Currently, the existing development is close to the property line. I'll have the land use team identify more about the existing condition. The proposal that we have before us today is for a new mixed-use building in this area, 4 stories. 27 units are proposed, 2 of which would be moderate income. That leaves the 25 remainder to be market rate. The bottom floor would have a 6,000 square foot commercial area dedicated to a new version of the Cantwell's Market. So they would be demolishing the existing structures on site and rebuilding it. That action of demolishing the existing Cantwell's building requires them to reapply or to apply for a new conditional use permit for alcohol sales since the passing of that ordinance in town. We had some questions about the inclusionary units that are required, so I just wanted to bring to the Commission's attention how this plays out in a project like this. So inclusionary units are essentially affordable or income-restricted units that help provide housing that is less than what would go for market rate. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the lowest affordable, but it provides something that's actually capped and monitored. So with our recent inclusionary ordinance, residential rental projects are required to provide inclusionary units. So anything over 10 units, 10 or more units are required to dedicate at least 10% of their total units as moderate income affordable. So this is the higher end of the affordability spectrum, but it still includes a lot of our workforce of teachers, nurses, houses, firefighters, attorneys are still in this income category, believe it or not. So this is kind of the purpose of that, is to kind of get those units in town, have them income capped. To determine the number of moderate income units, any decimal fraction of 0.5 or more is rounded to the nearest whole number. Anything less than 0.5 is then rounded and requires an in lieu fee. So for this project, we have 27 units, so it's 2 units that need to be dedicated, and then the remainder is an in lieu fee that's being provided. Going back to the proposal, the design team will walk through their design in more detail, the applicant. But just in general, we have the commercial space of about 6,000 square feet. They are proposing a corner plaza as facing State Street to try to engage the pedestrian activity there, and an arcade along State Street as well. They're proposing 27 units, 3 roof decks, and about 2 residential amenity spaces to serve the residents. And then in the garage, so all the parking is underneath the building, which is encouraged by the city generally to improve the aesthetics and the pedestrian streetscape. So they have done that. They've tucked the parking all underground in a garage. It kind of goes down into 2 levels. The first level has 8 spaces. This is the lowest level, has the remainder of the spaces. Also in this level to the top corner is the bicycle parking area for the residents and long-term parking for the commercial uses. The application is a little bit underparked in terms of bicycle parking as it's shown now, but the ordinance does require a few additional spaces that will be required as the applicant continues to design. In terms of general plan consistency, this is what we're here for your feedback on. In staff's review of our general plan policies and goals, what we found is really our general plan is urging a focus on new housing near transit and commercial services. It encourages and facilitates development of affordable rental and rental housing opportunities. This project has both. And it encourages construction of a wide range of housing types to meet the needs of various household types. So here we have, instead of just proposing single-family homes, we have a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, of smaller units that provides for a sector of our population, rental units, which is a help, and then moderate income inclusionary units as required. Our policies also encourage alternative forms of transportation and mobility so that use of an automobile is a choice, not a necessity. And this project site is really benefits from a lot of our local transit. So there's a Class 2 bike path up and down State Street, as we're all familiar. There's also an east-west connection to the west side neighborhoods and Milpa Street area. There's a bus stop on this property. You can see in the bottom left corner is the existing stop right on this property. There's another stop across the street, and then 2 B-cycle docking stations right across the street. The project went to HLC for its concept design. As I touched on earlier, that was one of the requirements, and they got some initial feedback. Overall, the HLC really appreciated the architectural style. They felt like it was in kind with the design guidelines and the style of the El Pueblo Viejo Design District. They did ask that the applicant study the massing and how the building portions are broken up. That the design as it currently shown appears that it's too big for the site. So consider breaking up the site, working on the massing. They suggested considering the amenity spaces that were shown and maybe looking at the floor-to-floor heights. Along these lines, the applicant has considered redesign, and they will continue to do that. They have started their ideas of how they want to respond to these comments by the HLC and also some of staff's comments. So they will be presenting a little bit of their ideas of how they're looking to redesign for you in their presentation. So to conclude, we just need your Planning Commission's comments and recommendations that we can pass on to the Historic Landmarks Commission when they review the project for action. So specifically on the design and then also consistency with the general plan, policies, and goals. Staff recommends that each commissioner make individual comments, and then your motion summarize the items that the majority of the commissioners agreed on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arciniega. Next, we're going to hear from the applicant, so please come on up to the podium. If at any point you will be sharing the mic with other team members, I'm going to ask that each one of you introduce yourself and your relationship to the project before beginning your presentation. Lastly, I just want to let you know, in case you're unaware, that you'll have 15 minutes to present, and if you end up not using the full 15 minutes, you'll be welcome to keep that and use it at any time. If you want to come back to the podium and respond to something, that time is reserved for your use. Very good. Mrs. Barza, when you're ready, please let us know that the timer is set, and I will welcome the applicant to begin.
The timer is set.
Okay, go ahead. Welcome.
Members of the commission, it's a pleasure to be here again, and I want to say I appreciate the time you spent with us on the site and asking your questions. They were good ones, and hopefully that's helpful.
Do me a favor and just present yourself. Who are you and how you're related to
sorry.
It's so obvious that we forget, so just have you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jay Blatter, one of the principal partners with HPA Architects, and we are the architects for the project before you today. Sorry about that. As Megan mentioned, you know, the existing site, I think you're pretty familiar with it. It's the existing Cantwell site. And I might add, our client is the owner and operator. It's a family-owned business. And they initially came to us because they want to enhance that business and at the same time build much-needed housing, so it's a true mixed use. This is not commercial space for the sake of showing commercial space. They plan on enhancing the Cantwell's market, which with my office up the street, we appreciate. We probably spend more money there than we should, but we love it there. So basically, and I guess if you look at our existing site plan, and I'm going to share with you because we heard comments from some of the neighbors and some great constructive suggestions from the HLC. We'll share that with you later. But the current project is a 4- and 3-story building. It is 27 units, of which there's 15 one-bedroom units, and their average size is somewhere in the mid-600s. And then there's 12 two-bedroom units, which are in the 950-plus square foot range. The existing building, we felt Cantwell's is such a great neighborhood resource, but we felt the interaction with the street, it needed to be more engaging on the pedestrian level. So along, and I don't think this works on the screen, but along State Street, we were proposing an arcade and outdoor dining. Right now, there's outdoor dining that's in the parking lot, and it's sort of a shame. It's not a very desirable place to eat, although it's widely used. And also, we thought it's great to have the dining venue along the street arcade relate to the bus stop. I've seen people having coffee and then running. So this way, there's good engagement with the street. The existing stone wall, Courtney J. Miller, we're extending the existing stone wall that is from the neighboring property. So there's a little bit of a cushion with the street, but it really has great visibility. The corner right now is a pretty active hub of activity, people coming and going from the Cantwell's market. So we are proposing a fairly sizable corner courtyard where the entry to Cantwell's would be and the entry to the outdoor dining. The building does step back 8 feet, so that's a one-story arcade, and then it steps back. So the entire building is sort of set back. We like the idea of having the patios and balconies facing the street because we feel visual engagement makes for a safer environment. We're really big on mixed use where the best security is sort of interaction between the residential users and the street activity. This shows the current design that was submitted to the HLC. It shows the entrance to the parking lot off of the Arriaga side. Our landscape architects have additional street trees and trees on the corner, and we have the entry to the residential with another arcade. So one important thing is right now the Cantwell's Market parking lot is pretty much a blank wall. So while there's dining there during the day, at night it's really not a great neighborhood spot. We feel transparency and adds to safety, so we want to have as much transparency along the street. As you look on the right side and the rear side, we have, while it's built property line to property line now, we have a 6-foot setback at grade level, and we have upper level setbacks to the residential units above. The open space is primarily in the patio you see, that's on the south side of the building, and it's also on some of the rooftop terraces. As I mentioned, some of our design concepts were to have a very pedestrian-oriented project that engages the street, doesn't turn its back on the street. We like the nice corner courtyard plaza to help soften things. The arcades and outdoor dining, we're trying to stay within the design guidelines of a true Spanish Santa Barbara styled environment along the street. We have a lot of setbacks and patios that we think also soften the mass of the building. The design materials are going to be two-piece mission tile, metal-clad windows, decorative steel balconies, and the type of elements that we will obviously go through an evolution with the HLC as we go further in the design of the building. As mentioned before, the primary parking is under the building as well as bicycle parking. The commercial parking on the first floor, if we can go up to the next slide, we located the driveways, and we did take into consideration many of the comments we got from Public Works, Building and Safety, Fire. So they pretty much, for the most part, we've responded to all their comments. So on the upper floor is where we'd have commercial parking, and that's nice because it gives an accessible path to the sidewalk, but it also gives a accessible path both to the residential building lobby as well as the Cantwell's Market. The upper floors, as I said, they're a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units, and you could see the setbacks in the rear yard. On the third floor, it pretty much, the current design mirrors the second floor. And then as we come up to the fourth floor, you can see there's the rooftop terraces that we had both flanking on the 2 corners of the building. And here shows the roof plan. We have ample space to conceal all the mechanicals and also to have solar, PV panels. And this is a cross-section through the current proposed project. This cross-section goes through State Street, and you can see the adjacent building's like 3 stories, and then it really drops down to 2.5 because they have underground parking. That building sort of wraps around us. And then here's the other cross-section through Arriaga Street. This is our 1-bedroom unit. We really like livable units that are flexible for the population it's serving. So we'd like to provide ample storage, accessible units with outdoor balconies as part of the required open space. And the 2-bedroom units we found with a lot of our housing projects in Santa Barbara, you do get a lot of roommate situations. So the idea that there's 2 equal bedrooms really encourages for couples and for, people like who work for me who often will have a roommate situation. And here's our landscape plan. And Aiku from Courtney J. Miller's office is here to answer questions. A lot of perimeter landscaping, street planting, and then you can see the plantings on the rooftop as well. I do see a lot of the neighbors are here who spoke at the last project. I'm glad to see you again. And I want to let everyone know that we heard comments from the neighbors, and we also heard comments from the HLC. And we've already started to evolve our thinking of how we could address comments that HLC suggested, and really was more like, consider these things. So I want to share with you, and I spoke to some of the commissioners. So this is some of the evolving design concepts. We look at it as a collaboration between ourselves and staff and the HLC. So what this slide shows is the previous design where we had the 4-story building going all the way to the west side where the neighbors had some concerns. We've now broken into 2 buildings. We're willing to forego some of those community terraces on the roof to slide more mass towards State Street and literally have 2 buildings. So the building along State Street is more of the 4-story building. We have a total breezeway. There's through light and air now into the courtyard. And we're stepping the building down to be 3 stories and a little 2-story portion fronting where the neighbors are. In addition, here you can see the State Street side still sets back 8 feet, but we pushed more of the mass towards State Street. I think HLC said consider it, and I think it was a really good thing to consider. We still have the corner plaza, and once again, you can see the comparison between the 2. We've also started to work with their comments on the style to soften it. It's interesting here, this shows where the 4-story portion, which is the light yellow on the left, has really been reduced. And what's interesting, in the revised design, we only have 33% of our building is really taking advantage of the 4-story height. 40% of our building is the single-story podium. 30% to 3 stories. So on the right-hand side, where we're closest to the neighbors, we've lowered the building, and in many cases have doubled the setback at the second and third floor. And I think what's really relevant is the fourth story, where sometimes that fourth floor was only 10 or 12 feet away. We now had the fourth floor between 180 feet away from the neighboring property. So we're working as best we can. We have a 27-unit project, but we want to be respectful of some of the comments the neighbors had. And also, you can see there's a ground-level courtyard, so now there's through breezeway, so air can get into that courtyard from the south and the north side. You can see it shows the little stair going up, and now we have a little outdoor courtyard where you come through a gate, and then you take the stairs up, or you can go into the lobby. I think do we have any other views? So anyway, if we go back to the previous slide, so I just want to share with your commission, I think I shared some of it, that we are evolving. This is not the final design, but we feel it's a very good faith effort to do a really earnest effort to address the comments and suggestions HLC had. And while I don't know if I can make all the neighbors happy, I'm trying to do the best we can to give you more breathing space. We've also reduced the balconies that face your unit. So obviously, a new building on a one-story parking lot's going to have impacts, but we want it to be a good building that fits well with the neighborhood, complies with the zoning, and doesn't overmax things out. So I don't know if I used up all my time, but if there's some extra time, I'm happy to answer questions later, or I can come
Perfect.
back.
Well, at this moment, you have exactly 4 minutes and 25 seconds to reserve for future use if you choose to do so. And
Well.
I will ask Mrs. Sparza to let us know if we have any commenters today, public commenters either in the room or remotely who may like to come up to the podium or speak over the speaker.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll open it up to the audience in person. If there's anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip in the back of the room and turn it into me. We do have one already, or a few already filled out. First up will be Kirsten Corson. Ms. Corson, if you can come up to the podium, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Corson. I'm the owner of one of the condos at 15 West Arriaga Street, and I'd like to speak in that capacity, and I'd also like to speak as a longtime resident of Santa Barbara. I appreciate the changes that have been made in the plan. They're a lot better than they were, but I would refer you guys to sheet A3.3E of the plan, which has got some aerial photos, and they've dropped a facsimile of the proposed building into the photos. And in the upper photo, you can see that that building, it still dwarfs even Plaza Linda Vista, which is to the south, and that is a big building. It takes something to be able to dwarf it. Also, I hate to say it, but it just looks institutional to me. They got rid of the balcony, the decorative elements, and I don't know, think Cottage Hospital, something like that. I mean, it's just a great big white building. And in the lower illustration, as I say, you can hardly see our condos. You have to know where to look. You can just, on the Arriaga Street side, see a little corner of our tile roof. I mean, the thing is, it's still just too big. I mean, it dwarfs the entire neighborhood. It even dwarfs the hotel across the street. So think twice. This is going to be around for a long time, and it will change the whole tone of that part of State Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Suzanne Cohen, followed by Patty Fike.
Hi, Commissioners, staff. I just want to say I'm here as a private individual. I also serve on a city commission, and I'm not here in any official capacity. I am Suzanne Cohen. I represent the Plaza Linda Vista Homeowners Association. I'm their current president, which is the property right next door, arguably the property that's going to be the most impacted, although I feel like this is going to impact the whole area. I appreciate Pradeep and Pranav's revisions. Jay, thank you for listening to us. I hope that they understand that our concerns as neighbors come as a deep connection for this area and legitimate concerns for our neighborhood's future. While we recognize the need for more housing in Santa Barbara, we must strike a balance with existing residents. While we've experienced extreme no-growth policies which have led to the housing crisis, it's clear that we don't want to swing this pendulum too far in the opposite direction. We need to have a middle ground that considers vital interests of both growth and preservation. Our neighborhood is already struggling with parking and other impacts from the giant El Prado development, which is just 2 doors down from our particular building. So adding 27 smaller apartments and a grocery store in a relatively small parcel will impact neighbors in all directions. Please give us a little bit more balance here. We urge you to consider our city policies related to neighborhood compatibility and work collaboratively with stakeholders for a balanced solution. Thank you for your time and consideration. I also want to say that when I left the HLC meeting, I felt like there was a direction to reduce the property to a 3-story building, and I'm not sure that I have felt that those comments were adequately reflected. I assume you watched those and you get notes from them, but that was the feeling from the neighbors when we left, that there was an appreciation for the fact that 4 stories, especially that street slants. So it's not, when you look at the plans, they have the buildings all straight and level, but actually it's at a slant so that they're actually quite a bit above us looking down onto our building. Thank you.
Thank you. And next I have Patty Fike.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Patty Fickey, and I am also in Plaza Linda Vista, which circles around the proposed development. I also understand and support our city. I love this city. I've been here a long time. I thought I was going to be able to die in the place where I'm living. I can't imagine continuing to live there with this change. And I think that that speaks to our concerns for neighborhood compatibility. And the fact is that you go down Arriaga Street, we are a neighborhood. It is mixed buildings. It's, different types of architecture and also some historic architecture on the street, and we use that street. The actual mass of the building, even though there has been reduction, is still overwhelming, overpowering. And I was thinking personally of me as I come up the street, because I live in the neighborhood and I walk around quite often, that a building that size is going to make me feel less safe, especially with the portico and everything, and it's massive and coming, and we're this little old street. The other thing is the stress on our street is there because we are a conduit to the 101 North at Arriaga. Currently, I find it incredibly unsafe to pull out of my driveway based on the street parking that's already there. It has been increased by the city's needs. I have spoken with the city several times. There's no way to improve it. We can't even have mirrors. And this massing, there's nothing inviting about it. I believe that the El Prado project was very well done in that how it was set back, however it was sunk, however it flowed into the entire thing. And there is still not, I believe, enough consideration for our neighborhood, and you'll change everything. We are at the end of where it should be mass. Please consider that it will, in the forms that it is now, it's unlivable probably for Plaza Linda Vista residents to have a good life. I don't want to open my door and see 3 stories even. There's no meaningful setbacks, and there's no way to help with light and up visuals. Even 4 out to State Street, you still can't look up.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Esparza, do we have any more in-person speakers slips?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I have not received any more in-person speaker slips, so I'll go ahead and turn to virtual public comment. If there is anyone participating on Zoom who'd like to speak on the item, please raise your hand. First up, I have Dustin Hoyseth, followed by Steve Ford. Dustin, I'm sending you an unmute request. Please unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hello, Chair Bonderson and Planning Commissioners. My name is Dustin Hoyseth. I'm the Public Policy Manager with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce. We represent businesses from Goleta to Carpinteria. The Chamber is happy to express our support for the proposed project at 1529 State Street. The need for housing of various types, sizes, densities, and affordability levels has been a top concern among the local business community for a long time now. The time for this housing is yesterday. The longer we take to debate the impacts of one reasonable project, the longer we continue to ignore the larger impacts that this housing supply crisis is creating in our economy and our community. For years, the community, the city, and the state have been calling for more mixed-use development. Despite this call to action, our local communities see much fewer mixed-use projects than would be expected. That is why it is critical that we all support these projects when they come along. Not only is this particular project a great example of the type of mixed use we should be hoping for in our city, it is also locally owned and locally minded. The property owner is a longstanding member of the community, and so is their business. They are proposing a project that meets the critical housing needs of our community. I've personally witnessed and heard from some of their business neighbors about the hard work that them and their team have done to reach out to the neighbors for feedback so they can ensure this is a project that fits the entire neighborhood's needs as well as the city. The process for building new housing projects within the South Coast jurisdictions has a reputation for being burdensome and lengthy. Today, the Chamber would like to encourage the Planning Commission, the Historic Landmarks Commission, and city staff to support this project throughout the city's processes. Projects like this are an opportunity to change the narrative and let the community know that the city supports mixed-use projects, incentivizing others who may be on the fence about a local project to come forward. Additionally, the city's current draft 2023-31 housing element contains several policies and programs to support this project. Policies calling for infill housing, reduced constraints, prioritization of housing with community benefits, flexible standards, and more. I hope you all had a chance to review my letter that goes into a little further detail on that. We hope that these policies and programs, which are aligned with the city's goals to create new housing, will be a part of the discussion as this project moves throughout the city's process. Please support this much-needed project and send a message to the community that the city will show expeditious support for these much-needed housing projects. Thank you for your time and your service to the community.
Thank you. Next, I have Steve Ford. Steve, I'm sending you an unmute request. Please unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. My name is Steve Ford. I am a city resident on Grove Lane, and I also work in the neighborhood of the subject proposed project here. I do support the project, and I just want to reiterate some of the points that the Chamber made in the letters that they submitted, and some of the points from the other supporters and letters that were submitted. You know, I think this is exactly the type of project that the city and the ADU program are intending to promote. There are 3-story buildings in the neighborhood. I believe there's even buildings that have 4-story elements to them in the neighborhood. Again, I work in the neighborhood. Our office had a 3-story hotel built directly adjacent to our setback and shared property line, and it affected our views and it affected our sun exposure at the office. You know, this is to be expected to some extent with urban infill projects. I would encourage the PC to support the project, let the HLC do their thing with regard to design review and refining that design. I would add to working in the neighborhood here, I've spoken with the applicant and emphasized to them the need to manage the site during the construction process. I know this is probably not in the PC's purview right now, but the hotel project left a little bit to be desired with regard to managing the actual construction site. It was disruptive. So I've encouraged the applicant to communicate with neighbors and respect the neighbors during the actual construction process. That's very important. So again, I do support the project and wish them luck, and I hope you do too. Thanks.
Thank you. And we do have one more raised hand. It's from our call-in listener with an area code 917. We're going to go ahead and send you an unmute request and allow you to speak. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Catherine Hensler. I am a resident at 1525 State Street, the Plaza Linda Vista building. I'm a little different because my unit is right against State Street and butts right against Cantwell's, and I overlook right now the roof of Cantwell's. My patio area is there. It's while I'm on the 3rd floor, it's almost like I'm just about a 2 floor, on the 2nd floor. My patio area, my bedroom windows, my wall of windows, my entrance to my unit will all be completely dwarfed by the proposed plan of what was just stated, that they're going to put more of the density and the higher against State Street, and there's very little buffer between, they're going to build right to the property line of the Plaza Linda Vista building. While I am in support of more housing and development, and I know that's inevitable, I've lived here all of my life. I've lived in this unit for over 20 years. I don't believe that the development should be at the expense of the existing residents. I believe that all of my neighbors who spoke very eloquently, and will not reiterate all of the points of the traffic, etc. I will say that I do believe that this development is just too large. I think we are all in support of development, and we know that will happen. But we just ask that that the development makes sense and the size of it makes sense for all of us. And I believe that was even brought up at the last Planning Commission, that several members spoke and said that when they visited the site, they just also felt it was just too dense for the area. So that's just wanted to reiterate some of the things that I'm on the other side of where the other residents are. So, and again, it will block out completely the sun. I've been following, and with the height of the building towering over us, it will completely block out any kind of sunlight that we will get, as well as privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more hand raised for Anna Demon. Anna, I'm going to send you an unmute request. Please unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I just wanted to speak up real quick. I'm a neighbor of Cantwell's. We live across the street. And I just wanted to say I think this is a beautiful plan. I think that the architectural team has done a great job in making it look like it would fit into the area and the buildings across the street, and it looks airy, and I think our town needs more housing, truly. When you look at what is on the market for rentals and for purchase, there is very little inventory, and this would help a lot. It's a bit of a dead this area of State Street, and I think, housing like this just helps. Having the parking underground is great. And I think this is being developed by, long-term, hardworking entrepreneurs. These aren't people coming in from out of town. These are people who've been serving our community for a really long time. And I appreciate that they're bringing this to the table. So just wanted to add that thought.
Thank you. And that concludes our virtual participants. We did receive written correspondence from 20 letters, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. So with that, I'll turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barza. So before I open the floor up for questions from my fellow commissioners, I just want to take a moment to review what we'd like to cover today. This concept review requires us to provide feedback to the HLC on design, overall improvements, and consistency with the city's general plan. So I'm just going to open the floor up to my fellow commissioners. Who would like to go first with questions? Wonderful. Commissioner Wiscombe, please. Your name came up first. You have the first spot. Go ahead, unless you'd like to give it up.
He tricked me into it.
Do you want to pass the torch? You're welcome to.
No, it's okay. It's
Okay,
okay.
go ahead.
I'd just like to ask, thank you all for the presentation. Just wanted to ask Ms. Arciniega about inclusionary again. Can we just go over that? Because I was a little confused by the slide, so.
Yes, Commissioner Wiscombe, thank you for that. It was actually brought to my attention, there is a typo on the slide. It rounds up to 2.7, and 7 being above 0.5 would mean that we round up to 3 units. Not doing the fraction of 0.5 and below is when we would do the in lieu fee.
So it'll be 3 inclusionary
3 units would be required if they're doing 27 units.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that clarification. I appreciate that. Then I guess I'd like to ask the applicant to come back up, please. Mr. Blatter, yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
Commissioner.
So if you're providing 3 deed-restricted units, will you do a combo of them, 1 and 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, right now, we don't have any units that we designed extra small or extra big, so we would select which units. We want to make sure it's reflective of the general mix in the plan. So
Okay.
all the ones are in the 650 ranges, all the 2s are like, so we didn't say, well, let's make these the affordable units. We haven't even selected them yet.
Okay, so you'll do so you understand it's 3 units, and you'll do the percentage if you have 10% one-bedrooms, you'll do one-bedroom unit, and then the other
Yeah,
will be 2.
we're totally open to that. We'd like to also find out a little bit more what's in demand in the city. I've had some projects I've done where they were saying, look, we need 2-bedroom affordable units, or they said, please, make the 1-bedrooms the affordable. That's what the demand is. So we're totally open to
Okay.
it, but we want to hear from the city and hear from
Yeah.
more feedback from the city so we can make the best choice to,
Yeah.
help meet the housing demand.
Okay, well, the 2 bedrooms, I think, are more flexible in terms of the moderate
Mm-hmm.
income units. So, okay, thank you for that. And then, can you go back to, I think it's slide 10 that you showed? You were showing the corner plaza. I just wanted you to go over no, it's not that one, sorry. I wanted you to go over you were talking about State Street, is that?
This one here?
Yeah, that one.
Another aerial view?
the-
Yeah,
the-
this one's probably good.
Yeah, so that's an undercover
Yes.
walkway on State Street, but it's set back on your property line, right?
Well, it's on the property line, but I think is it a 4-foot? I think there's a landscape setback requirement.
Excuse me, just to be really clear, at the site visit, it's not a walkway, it's a.
Yeah,
it's an
that's
area-
outdoor,
yeah.
that's outdoor dining, so that's
Oh,
totally.
it is outdoor dining. 'cause
It's going
you
to be
had said-
outdoor dining,
Okay.
and there's access from the store, and then the
Thank you.
second floor is set back an additional 7 or 8 feet, so that's where residents can have private terraces overlooking State Street. So we wanted to
Okay.
double up on the visibility to have activity on State Street, but also activity on the second floor, addressing more about the pedestrian-safe community.
Okay, so that's on your property, and it's really an outdoor dining space. Okay, I get that. I'm sorry, I apologize, I could not be at the site visit, so I did visit the site on my own, but I wouldn't have picked up on that.
That was a good question, very good
I
question.
appreciate that. And then, is your intention to do a solar study?
Well, I don't think we're required to do a solar study per se, but our building, I should point out too, that our building is pretty much to the north of, I know that one Colin person was concerned that we're blocking sun, but it wasn't our intention. I don't think we're required to do a solar study because it's all commercial zone property there. but I don't think we're going to impact the majority of the units because of where we've set back, So we're to the north. The person who was Liz, they said just to the left of this is really south of us. If anything, we're going to get shadows from their building.
Okay, because I think HLC asked you to, yeah, I thought that they did too,
And we don't have any problem. We can certainly do a shadow study because, as I said, being on the north side of the majority of the building and
Yeah.
with the setbacks. Also, I should add, and I know I'm not here to address calling concerns, but we are on the corner, the far corner, we are set back around 15 feet. So we created a little plaza between us and the building that surrounds us on State Street. And actually, in the revised design, we've got almost we have a 20-foot setback there, so it's not, you could see on the corner where the little gate is there. So we have a gateway and a little plaza. We're not building, none of our building is property line to property line as per the existing structures there. So I think we're really going to give quite a bit of air and light to that unit, and, we'll provide more information on that as we move forward.
Okay, yeah. The HLC did comment, conduct solar studies and study how the building will cast shadows and affect neighbors, so.
We'll definitely, what they requested, we're more
Right.
than happy
Okay.
to respond in kind with
Okay.
those studies.
Great. And then I think Ms. Arciniega said you're underparked now for bicycles. So are you going to resolve that?
Well, yes, we're going to resolve the bicycles, and also, I should point out, in the revised scheme, after studying the Cantwell's Market, we're going to be able to reduce the Cantwell's Market from 6,000 feet to somewhere in the 4,500 square foot range and still accommodate all of the functions they have now. So in that regard, actually, some of the commercial parking can be assigned to residential parking, and we already have studies underway to make up the difference on the bicycle parking. So yes,
Okay.
that's our full intention, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Okay, and then the commercial parking for Cantwell's will be on
Yeah, it's more it's on the upper level. And I do want to point out, because there was a couple of questions about safety, the current parking lot has two driveways, one of which is, I think, dangerously close to the State Street intersection.
It is, yes.
We're going to reduce this to one driveway, and based on city comments and HLC comments, we've pulled the gate back, so now we totally comply with safe visibility. So I think a single driveway with a controlled situation is probably safer than the two driveways that are there now, especially because of the one that's close to the corner of
So
State Street.
you're doing something close to the western driveway at Cantwell's now. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or-
we're going to be closer to, you can, actually, it's even further to the
Okay,
west.
okay,
Because there's
yeah.
an existing power pole that we were requested to avoid.
Okay, so it'll be even pulled further west.
Yep,
yeah.
and it's going to be pulled back, so the city
Okay.
has a sort of visual, a visual safety standard,
Mm-hmm.
so we're going to totally comply with that as well.
Okay. And as the design evolves, which it is, you've already started to respond to a lot of the comments from HLC and from the neighbors, you will continue to work with the neighbors and as the design evolves to perhaps address their concerns?
Yeah, I mean, it's my intention, and it's been our intention going back to the start, to listen and do the best we can. Being realistic, I don't think if I could ever 100%, satisfy everything.
No.
But I think when you take a 4-floor setback and go from 12 feet to 100 feet, when you start to move masses, while I understand that it's not satisfying, the neighbors in full, I think we're going to make an earnest effort to get a 27-unit project that meets the city requirements. And certainly, we've not gone to max out a 4-story building everywhere.
Right.
We'll do the very best we can. I think that's
Okay. That's great.
That's the
Okay.
way we like to work.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate that, and I apologize because I know some of this came up at the site visit and I couldn't be there. So I guess it's Commissioner DeLuccio's turn, who, since I'm now done and you tricked me into going first.
Well,
Thank you,
I
Madam
guess
Chair.
I'm not all that new anymore in the commission, but I used to always like to wait until toward the end. And I do have some questions. You had quite a laundry list, actually, you received in comments from the HLC when you went before them. And what are you doing, because they actually requested some visual aids, and they also requested the poles, the story poles, thank you, the story poles. So what have you done, or what are you doing in terms of visual aids?
Well, that's a good question. We've started to work in the redesign process, which is evolving. We'll certainly, as we model the project, we have the ability, we can simulate the model within existing photographs of the street, including aerials. And if story poles are required, obviously, we'll comply with the city requirements. But we can set our camera angles so we can locate where the person is standing in the street, and then we could superimpose that into a photograph. The programs we use are very accurate, so that HLC can see a visual simulation as they walk around the project.
Okay, so they'll make that determination when you go back, if that's acceptable?
Yes, when we come in with our full application, subsequent to getting your comments today, yes, we'll make additional refinements, and certainly we'll, we're proud of the building. We want to show its simulation within the existing context.
Was your takeaway that they did want to keep the 27 units, correct?
Yes, I
But-
think at the time, I think the city policy for housing was not looking how to reduce the units, and several commissioners or HLC members spoke up very supportive of that. I think what they were asking is there a way to move the mass around, reduce the amount of height where we can, and certainly taking into consideration the proximity to the building around this, and those are the things we focused on. And actually, I think it was the chairman was the one who actually sort of caught my imagination when he said, well, maybe you should almost break it into two buildings. And I thought that was a pretty interesting suggestion, and we sort of ran with it, and that's what you're sort of seeing here. So, yeah, we're going to continue working on this and, hopefully earn the support of HLC and the
Because they
community.
also had concerns about a four stories. And they actually, the wording they use is almost like not to have 4 stories. So
Right.
And so you still have 4 stories?
Yeah, we still have, as I said, if you were to look at our project, roughly a third of our footprint is 4 stories. I think 40% of it's 1 story. We really need to have a portion of the building 4 stories to get to 27 units. And it's more or less how we shape that in terms of open space. I think our clients and I, we did decide that we would forego 4th floor, as I said, community terraces and community amenity spaces. The size of this project maybe doesn't need that much amenity space, so basically, that's where we're shifting mass that was previously carved out, and that allows us to significantly reduce the amount of the 4 stories, and my goal was to try to get the 4 stories at least 80 feet away from the neighboring building.
Okay, the neighboring building on Arriaga, so what have you done to give them relief?
Well, we actually reduced the 4 stories there too. So right now, closest to, if you go closest to that building, we're almost 40 feet setback at one point, 20-foot setback at another point. And then once you get, and I don't know if we could, maybe, once you get beyond, you see that little 3-story just to the left of the stats, everything to the right of that is all just 3 stories and, the 1-story podium. So we've really have pushed the 4 stories to the corner where we feel close to a wide State Street, close to the bus stops. You have the hotel, which is a little more of a, I wouldn't say institutional use, but it's not a small use. That's where we feel the mass could go. We ran with that, sort of. It wasn't a direct comment to do this, but that's the direction we're going.
Yeah, and I actually, another comment we came up was the conduct of solar studies. In my days, what we call this on a former planning commission, and we used to call it shade and shadow studies, so.
We'll do a solar study, because as I said, pretty much, south is below us, so I don't think we're going to be really overly impacting. And I might add that if you look at the 13-foot setbacks on the side and the 13 and 20-foot setbacks, and their building, I think, is set back 7 feet, we should have close to 20-foot minimum space between us and them. And I've seen new projects approved in the city with 20-foot paseos and units. So while I understand it may not be desirable like a view, I think we're going to try to make it with landscaping and good architecture, a pleasant space between the two buildings.
I have two more questions. What about the mechanical equipment and everything? Is that away from the neighbors? Did
Yeah,
you
the
try to move-
mechanical equipment, we can screen away from the neighbors. We can get most of it, within the wells on closer to the State Street side. So it'll all be concealed, and certainly acoustically, we'll isolate that. We don't want to have, and right now, I mean, the Cantwell's has exhaust and there's, that's where the trash is kept. There's mechanical stuff. So I think all in all, cleaning it up, improving the drainage, getting some breathing room around this L-shaped building, while it's a change, and I understand, anxiousness with change, I think it's going to actually be an improved situation. That's my goal, at least.
Okay, and I know this question always comes up, the floor-to-floor area. Are they 9 feet?
We were trying to maintain 9-foot ceilings, and we do that because we think it creates a livable space. It allows me to go with 8-foot tall window header heights, which gets more daylight and natural ventilation. So the goal is to have 9-foot minimum ceiling heights. If as a result of slope, we have to go to 8-10, I mean, we'll be flexible, but I think that's pretty much a standard on most of our multifamily projects, affordable projects, senior projects, 9-foot ceilings.
And what about the tower? Nobody's mentioned the tower.
Well,
have-
it's interesting.
Elevator
The
tower.
elevator tower, we've totally brought that down to the minimum height it has to be just to handle the elevators. We've quieted it down. One of the comments from HLC, and I know someone commented about some of the ornate detailing, was to sort of quiet this down a bit. So we no longer have that taller tile tower. It's the elevator override, but it doesn't have to be as tall. So we've reduced that.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While you're there, Mr. Blatter,
Hi.
what is the existing size of the existing Cantwell's?
The existing Cantwell's building, I believe, is, I'd have to check the survey because that's one stat I don't have off the top of my head. Is it 6? I'm going to estimate I don't know if we have that on the survey, 6,000 or 7,000 feet. It's like 7,000 feet roughly. I don't have that number right off the top of my, how much? 8,700. It's 8,700 and change. That's the Cantwell's, not does that include the one-story building?
Both buildings.
Oh, both buildings. So the current buildings are 8,700 square feet and change.
Okay, and so I walked into Cantwell's after the site visit because I wanted to see what it's like now. And so I'm trying to visualize what did you say? It's going to be about
The
4,500?
total square footage of the Cantwell's building and the other little commercial building that's adjacent on the property line is 8,700 square feet total.
And so you're proposing, of course, the smaller building isn't part of the Cantwell's market.
Right, no, that's a
And
separate
so,
rental
yeah.
commercial property.
So, and so the new one will be about 4,500 square feet.
That's correct, Commissioner Lodge. Originally, we thought we needed 6,000 feet, but after a more careful examination and, getting creative, we feel we can bring it down to 4,500 square feet.
And so the space that is no longer going to be part of Cantwell's, is that going to be used for, what will that space now
Well,
be
the
used
ground
for?
floor plan, you're going to have the Cantwell's Market sort of on the corner, and then behind the Cantwell's Market's where we have the commercial parking. We're getting all the trash and refuse off the street and putting that within the parking structure. We have our handicap accessible parking in there as well. So pretty much it's going to be parking behind Cantwell's, except it's within the building, and then it accesses the ramp to go down, and then the Cantwell's Market, and then, of course, we're cutting back to create the outdoor dining along State Street. And you can see, we have some articulation along Arriaga Street with landscaping and breaks.
Okay, and then on the south side, what is, how far back, what are the setbacks on that side? I know it varies, but,
Well, on the south side, to the garage, we have a pretty much a 6-foot sort of space we put between our sort of podium structure. And that's around the entire perimeter. And then on the upper floors, it varies. It varies from like 10 to 12 feet on the existing design, on the new design, and maybe I think it'd be good to show that, because that's the direction we will be going, if that's okay. So on that color-coded plan, if we can get there, you can see on the right-hand side, which I guess would be the south or the west side, is 13 feet to the three-story portion, and then we have 13 feet, just south of the, north of the other building. As far as the upper level setbacks, the four-story portion, as I said, are going to be 40-foot setback and like 20-foot setback from that south, property line.
Okay, and one other question. Where did it go?
Yeah, and I
Oh,
might-
and is the sidewalk where the outdoor dining begins, and this may be for staff, is that the ultimate distance that the pedestrian master plan calls for?
Commissioner Lodge, are you talking about the State Street frontage?
Yes,
or
with State Street.
That is, so the extent of State Street will remain the same. There is a minor addition to the sidewalk on Arriaga frontage, but State Street will remain, is consistent with the
Okay.
pedestrian master plan.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Next, we have Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we've talked a bit about solar studies and privacy concerns, so I'm curious about the timeline, and I'm not sure if this is for the applicant or for staff, but the HLC requests for solar study and a number of other items came in March. Your applicant letter came in July, and now we're here mid-September. So what's the timing for it to return to HLC, and is there an expectation that all of those items will be addressed before it goes back to HLC?
Well, I don't want to get my staff worked up if I put too much of a timeline on this, but no, our intention is we wanted to hear your comments as part of the process, just like we heard all the other city comments in HLC. Our intention is to take the sort of, I would say, mid-complete, redesign we've been working on, refine it, and we hope within the next, maybe within the next 2 months to get back into HLC or get back in with a complete application. The thing that will actually probably dictate the timing more than the work we do is there are still several third-party studies that the client had held off doing because he wanted to get your comments to make sure the scope of those studies were, commensurate with the questions you have. So depending on those studies, I would say maybe, depending on their schedule, 2-3 months, we'd like to get an application back in. I guess staff then takes 30 days to review it. And yes, we'll be prepared when we go back to HLC we want to win the day with HLC. We're going to provide those studies.
Great, thank you. And then a question for staff around the reviewing the project's consistency with the city's general plan. So I noticed that in the staff report, that under the general plan consistency, it omits a key part of the land use element focus growth principle. So it says to encourage housing, but doesn't say to encourage affordable housing. I know that was in as an exhibit, but was that distinction intentional?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Boss, so the question is whether the additional term of affordable in the presentation was intentional or?
So affordable was omitted in the staff report. So I'm just curious why, or if that was just an oversight.
That was probably because the staff report is a little more of a direct quote, whereas the presentation is more of a summary of lots of policies in one blanket statement. So it was probably an oversimplification in the presentation. Housing in general is encouraged. We especially prefer income-restricted housing, but both are goals of our housing element. Does that clarify?
Yeah, I think I was just trying to understand why it didn't say focused growth principle was to encourage affordable housing. It just said to encourage housing. And I want to make sure that we're making that distinction.
Commissioner Boss, just to be clear, the actual policy says workforce and affordable housing. And as you know, the term workforce is not defined in our general plan, so that does leave it open to a little bit of interpretation.
Okay. I think those are my questions for now.
Thank you. And next, we have Commissioner Wardlow, please.
Thank you. My first questions will be for the applicant. Thank you. So the first line of your applicant letter notes that you'll be utilizing SB 3330. I know that, I think it's been discussed that that was maybe a mistake, but I wanted to see if you would contemplate that again.
Well, I think on most of our housing projects, we usually file an SB 330, but no, our intention is strictly to comply with the ADU program. We're not asking for any special AUD, any special state density bonus, any special variances. So this is strictly going to be in compliance with the AUD the average unit density program.
Okay. And regarding, another part of your applicant letter that notes that you'll be doing 15% inclusionary housing, would you consider doing 15% based on your applicant letter?
I think you should look through to the owner, but no, I think at this point, we're proposing 10%. I think that might have been an error, or, I think at one point, the city was contemplating increasing their minimum requirement, but no, it's going to be 10%. Sorry.
All right. So there are two errors in the applicant letter that made me excited, right? I was excited to see the opportunity for low-income housing being created through SB 330, and then the idea that there would also be a 15% inclusionary, which would be 4 units, right? So both not happening.
No, we, early on, I have to say, we'd looked at different zoning studies, but considering, the neighborhood concerns, I think a bigger building would have only been more, more concern for them. So
Oh, no, I
we
agree.
looked at it, we try to balance, certainly, and once again, Pradeep and Pranav, they're local business owners. This isn't a land developer coming in and saying, let me max out the density so I could bring in a builder developer. So they really wanted to comply with the AUD program, but do a building that was as sensitive as we could make it towards their neighbors.
And the AUD program is 10% at a very minimum, so you could easily do 15%, and that would still comply with the AUD program.
Yes, I get your point. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate it. That's the remainder of my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. And before I take my turn, I just want to mention that I see Commissioner Lodge's light on. Do you want to add another question at this moment before I start?
If I may,
Absolutely, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. What is the density of this project? Dwelling units per acre, is it at the max?
Yeah, I believe it is at 63 dwelling units per acre.
Okay.
On page
Thank
3.
you. And the other questions for the applicant, what is the overall height of the building?
The maximum height per, code is 48 feet, from the existing grade.
Okay, thank you. Those were my additional questions.
Of course, and I always like to make sure that my fellow commissioners can, for the most part, be finished with their questions before I chime in, but if anyone wants to come back around afterwards, be happy to let you, before we move on to the deliberation period. So I have a few questions. I'm actually going to continue Commissioner Wardlow's line of questioning. I was interested in understanding a little bit more about the applicant team, the owner, just your frame of thought. Not to say it's right or wrong, but just to know more about your approach. At any point during your initial process before coming here today, at any time, did you ever consider or look into how using the state density program, the state bonus density 330 plus ADU, how that might work for the site? And if so, what made you move away from it? What is your thought process, if there is some?
Sure, no, I'd be happy. Well, I think the clients who were already introduced, Pradeep Shastri and Pranav and their family, they own and operate Cantwell's, literally operated, they're there every day. We did different zoning analysis, in terms of how you can max out up to, significantly more units. But in looking at the massing and the parking that we can get underground, we didn't want to underpark the site, and we felt, while I know with affordable housing, sometimes you can underpark, we felt the neighborhood would not really be happy underparking there. So just really in terms of the bulk and mass, happening to go maybe a full 4 stories and not being able to park it adequately per code, which we are required on the commercial, we sort of early on decided we don't want to They didn't want to build too big of a project. They want a project that'll work feasible for them to improve Cantwell's and stay there, but, not sort of have a project that's going to really not be well-received by the neighborhood. And so that's really why the project took its current shape.
Thank you. And I don't remember what slide it was, but the slide that you brought today that's not part of the official packet, just to show us your thought process and your progress, the one that shows the new floor plan and how it's laid out, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question is, if it were supportable here today, would you consider possibly adding units back to 4 stories, maybe studios or smaller units, to consider adding units in order to increase housing opportunities, but still being respectful of what you're trying to do here by pulling back the setbacks? So you're not pulling back so far.
Yeah, well, it's something I would have to discuss, obviously with the applicant. As you can see, when you look at the darker orange, we've gone to great lengths to sort of wrap this with the 3 stories. I think my inclination is we'd want to keep this more intimately scaled, and I understand the need for housing, and I know in some downtown locations where you may not have sensitive immediate neighbors, we would certainly do it. We have other projects on the boards. My inclination would be, we can look at it. Just like we looked at the HLC, I will look at it.
Very good.
I'll only in earnest look at any question or comment. My inclination would be that we probably would not look to make the project bigger, especially hearing, from the neighbors here. I don't think that would be something they would be happy
Well,
about.
I'm just going to commend you for standing strong and respecting the neighbors' requests. I know that you're doing everything you can to cooperate. And this is not a design review, so
Right.
I'm just
No, I
thinking out
appreciate-
loud. I wanted to just mostly understand the approach that your team and your owners have brought forward to get to where you are today. It helps us to understand. I have a question on slide 12. I think that's one slide that will show, or that there's also a rendering that demonstrates the side closest to the bottom of the screen. You have an opening from the garage. What does that opening lead to, and why is it there?
That opening was just, and actually, it could end up being just grill work. I think it's like an archway with grill work. It was just to get some fresh air.
That's what I
And-
was looking at, yeah.
Yeah, there's no vehicular access coming out of there. That'll just be probably some ornamental grill work or tile work. So it's really just to get some light and air into the garage. Keep in mind, right now, the existing building's right up on the property line. So once again, we think by creating this sort of accessway around the building with some trees and landscaping, it's going to be improved. And I also understand there is some drainage issues even on the neighboring property and this property. So our civil engineers are looking to take advantage of that to improve things.
Very good. I was just trying to understand what the purpose of that opening
a good
was, but it's
question.
meant to just be not used to pass through.
No.
And you'll articulate it at a later time.
Absolutely.
Very good. That actually completes my questions. And again, I just want to say thank you for explaining the position. So I don't see any other lights on, so I will assume we're finished with our question period. And I just want to remind the commission and Ms. Arciniega, if you could tell us, just again, as a reminder, what are you looking for from us today for our motion, please? Just to keep us focused.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. So we've received your individual comments now. Staff is looking for a motion that would summarize the items that a majority of the commission has agreed upon, and then any comments on dissenting comments, if there are any.
Excellent. All right, so I'll open this up to my fellow commissioners who would like to go first for deliberation. All right, thank you for volunteering, Commissioner DeLuccio.
I'll go first. Okay, I want to thank everybody who came out today, and I can really sympathize with the neighbors on Arriaga. Just my comments, I think going forward, overall, I like the design of the building, but as much as you can get rid of the 4th story as possible would be better. It does step down along Arriaga. I realize to 3 stories and 2 stories, and you put breezeway in between, you divided it up into 2 buildings. as far as, I'm glad we have 3 moderate units in there out of the, and 27 total. And, we're all, this whole commission, I appreciate, we want more housing. There's ways we will get there. I mean, I think the city actually should be asking for more than 10% of the state density bonus. We're not doing state density bonus here, but we should get more than 10% of affordable housing here. It should be more, maybe like 15 or 20. If you had 20, this would be 5 units. It was 15 to be 4 units. But it is what it is, 3 moderate units. I cannot support going with SB 330, and that's just totally is contrary to what the neighbors are requesting. The building it's right behind, it goes around, it surrounds what you're trying to do. It's like an L-shaped building. So I think we need to get the massing down. We shouldn't be increasing the massing, in this case, by adding more units. Even though it's nice to have more affordable units. I like the arcade along State Street, where you're going to have the outdoor dining. And I also do encourage the solar study, to do some solar study and visual aids. I mean, I think you need to demonstrate to the HLC that you don't want to do story poles, because I know they call that out. Let me see what else I wrote down here. I think the staff, as we go forward, I think we're still waiting to get the housing element adopted. Is that correct? It hasn't, and as we go forward, and get into policy, I think we definitely need to define the word what workforce housing means. But I think we can make the findings. We have to make findings against the general plan today. The general plan is obviously balancing out affordable housing is key, but it's balancing out the housing, affordable housing, along with the compatibility with the neighborhood. So I think we can make the findings, and I think we also can. I can anyway, and also with the refinements you're doing and continue to do on the design, I think it's very positive. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. Next, we have Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, in no particular order. Ms. Arciniega showed a slide, and this is in the commercial high-density area. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I do appreciate what the design team has done in terms of responding to HLC's comments to date. I think you're absolutely going in the right direction. I like the building split. I think that really breaks it up, and I also like the 3 stories on the west side and coming around the south, and then concentrating the 4 stories on the State Street side. I think that's kind of in keeping with the commercial high density. And the bus stops are very close on State Street, so that's, I love the corner plaza. I think that's a really, really nice design feature, a very nice design feature that just adds an element of personality to the building. And I appreciate the location of the commercial parking. I think that's well thought out. I like the dining arcade on State. It's going to activate State in that area in a very positive way. We've got, you said 4 stories, about 23%, and 3-story, about 30%. I think that's really going in the right direction. And I appreciate the generous setbacks from some of the living areas that some of the neighbors talked about. It's very hard to go from an existing 18-foot high building to a 48-foot high building in some spots. And it does represent very impactful changes to the neighbors. But I think you have done, and hopefully will continue to do, I encourage you to continue to do a great job in talking to the neighbors and keeping up with them and making sure no one's ever going to be totally satisfied, but I think making the effort is very important, and having some flexibility is very important. I absolutely think that there should be a solar study done, just to see the impacts on sun and shade on the neighbors, as HLC recommended. I think that was a big concern. I'm with Commissioner DeLuccio. I really don't support story poles. I don't think they tell you a lot, but I would support absolutely we've done it, we've seen it on other projects. I don't know what you call it, but what do we call it? A 3D walkthrough? Well, it's actually the video walkthrough of the whole perimeter of the site. I think that's really important. Thank you very much for that. I don't know, I think there's probably a really official name, but I don't know what it is. Huh? It's true. Yeah. So, that's it, video simulation, yes. I would love to see you possibly confer with HLC and perhaps get that as opposed to story poles, because story poles go up and people go, oh my goodness, and you can't understand the depth of the structures through story poles. You just see the height. And I already said that I appreciate the changes the direction you're going to date. I think that's pretty much my comments, but I actually think that this will be a very lovely project. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In general, I concur with the comments of Commissioners DeLuccio and Wiscombe. I do want to remind everyone that this has maxed out the density, and I really appreciate this project and this maxing out the density allowed. And I really appreciate all the efforts that the design team and the owners have gone to try to make it something that's more acceptable to the neighbors. It's life if you, as one of you mentioned, when you're, or one of my colleagues mentioned, when you have a one-story building that is totally out of your view, that's suddenly replaced by one that's 4 stories in part, it's not going to be a happy situation for you. But I think that that it is allowed, that the zoning and the ADU ordinance allows this kind of development on that corner. And I do appreciate the fact that the applicant is doing all they can to soften the blow. And by moving the 4-story towards State Street, which I think is a very appropriate thing to do. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Next, we have Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reaffirm the comments from HLC and from my fellow commissioners. I actually walked the block on that side of the block to kind of just consider for myself the size, bulk, and scale. And it goes from a 1-story building to a 2-story building to a 3-story building, and this building would be 3 to 4 stories, and landing on that really wide street that is heavily used by pedestrians, bikes, buses. So for me, who lived in that neighborhood, that seems like a natural progression to me, and it is meeting a great need. I also want to appreciate the change in size, bulk, and scale. It's broken up. The 4 stories has moved to really the opposite side. You've increased the setback. You've added additional breezeways. And I think just kind of processing the comments from some of the neighbors, it's unclear if the neighbors have an issue with any development at all, or if it's just the height. So I appreciate all that you're doing to really accommodate their needs. I want to also add in that I'd prefer the solar study over the story poles. I think that tells us more. And also want to appreciate the parking, although, again, when I lived in the neighborhood, I didn't use a car because you have the great bikeway and buses. It's a really great walkable area. So those are my comments in terms of the proposed design and improvements of the project. In terms of the project's consistency with the city's general plan, quite a bit of the public comment in support acknowledges our housing crisis, and I want to be clear that we don't have a market rate housing crisis. Really based on the permit details in our housing element draft, our update draft, we're doing exceptionally well at producing market and above market housing. The crisis really lies in the lack of affordable housing, and this project does really the bare minimum with the 3 units for affordable housing. So I'm always going to request that there be additional affordable housing units, but I understand that the city really needs to create more incentives to produce more affordable housing. Those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Boss. Next, we have Commissioner Wardlow, please.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Thank you to the applicant. I am supportive of this mixed-use development and the construction of rental units in our community. I do believe this is an excellent location as it's complementing the long-term goals of our planning as noted in the land use element from 2015 in terms of the character, design, and I believe in terms of maintaining and enhancing the neighborhood. In terms of this specific project and the design and the improvements, as Commissioner Wiscombe noted, and I think some of the others, I very much love the use of the corner plaza and the outdoor dining. I think that's really going to add value to this area. I really appreciate the changes that you all made in terms of the HLC's feedback and the decision to break up the building. I think that was smart and I think a good step in terms of showing your willingness to kind of work with the commission and feedback. I like the enhanced setbacks, and I always love the landscaping. The landscaping looks great. Though I do understand the neighbors' concerns and their willingness and desire to keep the neighborhood the way it is, I very much understand that the views will be impacted, and that does really sadden me. But I do find that this development is consistent with our need to create more housing, and that especially by incorporating the beloved Cantwells, that this is a really great example of a mixed-use development. Almost a really, really, really good example. But I am unfortunately disappointed with the lack of affordable housing in this. I think the project falls short in this category significantly. I want to be clear on the comments and kind of line of questioning that I had. I am not suggesting that we increase the bulk and scale of this project. I'm asking the applicant to consider increasing the number of affordable units within the 27 units that are proposed. In terms of the consistency with the general plan, it is consistent with the 2015 housing element in that it is building rental housing, and it's in an appropriate location. And I do think it's a good use of infill housing, as you know, there's other projects we've seen using, claiming that, and I don't feel like they're very appropriate. This one I do, but it does not address the central policy goal that the general plan is trying to achieve, which is affordable housing. In our current 2015 housing element, in H1, in H11, it states, the production of affordable housing units shall be the highest priority, and the city will encourage all opportunities to construct new housing units that are affordable to extremely low, very low, low, moderate, and middle income owners and renters. And our housing element also suggested back in 2015 that we would consider a 15 to 25% inclusionary affordable housing. That obviously did not happen, and this is why, we continue to struggle with affordable housing today. So I really ask the applicant to consider at this time, just like they did with the breakup of the building, increasing the number of affordable units that are going to be, that are currently proposed within the 27. And that's really the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And so now it's my turn. It's always hard to go last because so many other commissioners have taken all my passion and put it into their words, and it sounds just right. So I will just touch on a few things that stand out to me, even though I'm in full agreement with literally everyone's comments here today. I just want to start by saying that this project before us is exactly the type of project that the city and the AUD program is trying to promote. I think that the architecture, the design, both the original and the direction that you're going, is doing a great job to uphold architectural expectations for Santa Barbara's urban fabric. Personally, I prefer the architectural elements and the shared rooftop amenities and the architectural articulations and undulations of the original design, but then again, I know that you came here with sort of a massing and you took away a lot of those details. I hope they come back. And I'm looking forward to actually following along because I'm excited about this project. The architecture is lovely. Just keep keep some of those original details when you come back again. I also want to say that I noticed that and you mentioned that the tower has gone away. I would like to see that tower. I don't know if there's the ability to bring it back or to continue having it a little bit as a highlight of this project. I think it's an important design element. It ties into architectural, our expectation of Santa Barbara's architecture here, so don't let it disappear on us. I'd like to have it back if I may suggest it. I'm really, we talked about it quite a bit on site. At first I didn't understand, but the efforts that you have made as a team to pull the project back from the property lines and provide increased setbacks more than you're required to have, it demonstrates your interest to cooperate with the neighbors and provide additional space and light and air. And I think that's very respectful. I think that it's going to really make a nice impact to the future of this project. I'm sorry to see that you've pulled back from 4 stories in some areas to 3. I might stand alone on this one. I'm not bothered by the bulk and scale and massing. I just think that as long as you get away from the edges that impact the neighbor's privacy and allow that light and air separation, both sides, both properties will benefit. So it sounds like you're doing that. I don't need to say anything more. But I do want to just, if I can for a moment, put the design hat on and say, if you can get another unit on the Arriaga side that's still away from the neighboring property where you've come down to 3, maybe there's an opportunity, as long as it's far enough away, maybe it'll add an affordable unit that we haven't thought of yet because it wasn't on the table for discussion. But I do stand with my colleagues when we say there's so many opportunities here to add the affordable housing that we're looking for in our community. If you can, we can't require it, but we certainly recommend it and hope to see it because it will help with the city goals and it'll help with the community. Things that we need in our community that we can't enforce per se because you're meeting all the city's requirements, but we certainly would like to suggest you consider it. There's a trade-off. If you can, give something back. And I just want to say I'm so happy to see this type of project, to support mixed-use projects. I don't think we have enough of them in our community. I love the State Street facade. I love the covered loggia. I think it's going to add to the Cantwell's experience. Glad to see that they're staying. And in the future, if that market isn't there, someone else could use it as a restaurant, as an outdoor dining area. It adds to that area, something that doesn't exist there already. So thank you for adding that into your design. And I just want to commend the project team. It seems like you are actively responding to neighborhood feedback, to the HOA, to us, and open to redesign and open to continued cooperation. And I'm sure that not everyone will always be satisfied, but you have the right to develop your property. And you're doing what you can to cooperate, and that's beyond what is required of you. So thank you. Keep that up. It's nice. We wish everyone would do that. So thank you for making a positive experience out of this. I'll just wrap this up by saying I agree with the solar study. I think it's a requirement for you, but I think it's really going to help, hopefully help satisfy some of the concerns because you're demonstrating it, and that can come off the table for the neighbors. And also the video simulation, I hope that we can make this into a future regular solution so we don't have to talk about it every time in lieu of those story polls. It's just a much better way of handling it. So please volunteer that. We look forward to seeing it. It'll be exciting stuff. So I would like to, before I go further, I see Commissioner Lodge one more time. Please come on.
You
before I ask for motion.
mentioned the phrase video sim. I just would like to ask, some architects have done ones where it's at a bird elevation, where they fly around it. No person's ever going to see it from that angle, so please don't do that kind.
I agree.
Thank you.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Commissioner Lodge, because I was going to say something, it completely slipped my mind, but I'm going to say it now. We saw a video simulation last week for the project that we reviewed on Carrillo Street, excuse me, and it was really well done. It was a person walking and then kind of turning around and looking back, and then walking around the corner and looking back, and crossing the street, and it was really pedestrian-friendly. If you aren't familiar with it, take a look at the recording, but I would love to see more of those just because they're so useful, and it's not the bird's view that no human being will see. But yes, I'm sure you know how to do that, you know what it is, and I look forward to seeing it because I think it'll be an exciting way to support the project further. So now I would like to ask for a motion from my fellow colleagues. Is there anyone who would like to make the motion today? We just need a motion summarizing the items that the majority of us agree upon.
Do we actually have to summarize them? I think we pretty much agree. I think probably the only thing that was mentioned that was not mentioned by most of the commissioners was the tower.
Yep.
I think most people like the separation of the buildings, but,
And before you go on, I'm not saying that I disagree with the separation. I just think that there's room for a tower element in some
Okay.
format.
okay, yeah. So I'll just make a motion that, that we forward our majority comments, which I think were really expressed by the majority of the commission, on to HLC.
Are you comfortable with that motion as it stands?
Yes,
For
Chair.
your needs? Okay. And I heard out of the corner of my ear, a second by Commissioner Boss. Is there a discussion on this? Would you like to add something, Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes, I just wanted to add that if it's possible that we really note that, like, yes, we all find this consistent with the bulk and scale, the character of the neighborhood, those elements of the land use plan and of the housing element, but that it is not consistent in our desire to achieve affordability. Because I think that component of the land use and the housing element are definitely not being addressed at all in this project. So I think it's important that we explain that that part is not consistent. But there are obviously a number of elements that are very consistent with this, but I think it's important that we point that out.
Thank you. And may I just direct this as a question to Ms. Ostringer from just the city attorney's standpoint? Are we able to define that difference and as we interpret the affordable housing portion?
Chair Bonderson, it's something that if an individual commissioner wants to make a comment on, I think it's appropriate. I don't necessarily know that it's within the purview of what you're asked for today, but I think it can be noted in the individual comments.
Okay, so if that's the case and we can't add it to the motion, I just want to make sure that it is added to the record. And we would then continue forward with the motion, is that correct? As it stands?
I wanted to add something to the motion.
Sure,
I-
let's
Actually-
hear you.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Could I address that point first? H11 talks about encourage, so I'm fine with what Commissioner Wardlow is saying, as long as the word encourage is used. And I think that's a very important word here, as opposed to any other word. So if we just use that language, I'm fine with that.
That's the
Okay.
word I was going to use also, to encourage. I was going to go a step further, we don't have to do this. Encourage, but also consider or encourage, as you're exploring the design further, if it's amenable to look at adding another one or two more affordable units. Can I go that far?
It shouldn't be a problem, the way that it's being worded. So is there anything else you'd like to add, Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes, and Ms. Ostringer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do just want to clarify for the record, because I know that I'm the one that noted H11, but I also want to note, the very first element of our land use element in LG1 is resource allocation priority. Prioritize the use of available resources, capacities for additional affordable housing for extremely low, very low, low, moderate, and middle-income households over all other new developments. So, that's an example of that is the first point of our land use element, and that is obviously not being addressed in this. So I just want to be clear that I agree with the notion that Commissioner Wiscombe notes around encouraging, because that is all we can do in this moment. But to be clear, it is in our land use permit that it is supposed to be prioritized above all other developments.
All right, so I just want to recognize the changes, and if Commissioner Wiscombe accepts those changes, I will ask for a second. Are we in agreement? Since we're slightly amending our original motion?
I'll accept a change.
Do I have the second from Commissioner Boss, please?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other further discussions at this time? Is that what you were going to ask as well, Commissioner Lodge? Commissioner Lodge, did you want to ask a question or add a discussion item?
I just wanted to make a comment.
Please do.
The fact that it is these very low, and so on, are not being, units are not being prioritized is the way the ordinance is framed. And it really requires the city council to change the ordinance.
That's
So-
absolutely correct. I mean, that's why the word encourage is just encourage, and we ask consideration, but we cannot enforce it. It's not in our purview. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you. And just on Commissioner Lodge's comment, I don't think we can go through this every time we have a housing project here, but we have studies that have been done on inclusionary housing that have really basically said that 10% is I think even the state has a 15% limit before you have to actually justify it. But 10% is where our city council has been. It's been before our city council at least once or twice, and it remains at 10%. And to say that we're not meeting a general plan policy because it's not high enough, and we don't, what is high enough? 100% would be high enough. 20% would be high enough. So I just think that we need to be a little cautious when we're making these statements on something that's really not meeting with it. This is a private development. He's meeting all the conditions of our AUD program, and I think he has a right to move forward with the 3 units and we can be thankful that we're getting 3 units. We're not going to get a lot of inclusionary housing, or deed-restricted housing from private developments. It's just not going to happen. It has to be public-private partnerships or our housing authority or some of our other nonprofits that build affordable housing. They're going to provide it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. And I just want to just add that I appreciate Commissioner Wiscombe's clarification of where we stand as a commission, that we have to follow the ordinance and how it lays things out. We don't have the freedom to change our purview, unfortunately. We can remind our applicants that there's opportunities to offer something beyond the requirement, as I asked, but we can't come and chase you down and force you. But we hope, based on good faith, you'd be interested in considering it, and hope to see that possibly appear and make us feel good, but certainly we can't require it. So that being said, I'd like to ask Mrs. Esparza for a roll call vote based on the existing motion from Commissioner Wiscombe, second from Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And we thank you all for being here today. We are going to be moving forward with our next item. It's a discussion item, and before I introduce it, I would like to give the next group time to set up and allow for everyone else to take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 3 p.m. We are back. I'm calling the end of recess at 3 p.m., and I would like to welcome the next project and project team. This is item 4, which is a discussion item. And due to the conditions of the CUP for the existing homeless shelter located at 816 Cacique Street, the Planning Commission receives a report every 2 years from the current operators of the facility. We have a representative from People's Assisting the Homeless, that's well known in our community as PATH. They are here today to report to us, but I will let Kelly Broadison from the city introduce the project first and then pass it over to the presenters. Welcome, Ms. Broadison.
Good afternoon, Chair Bonderson and Commissioners. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, this project, as you said, is a 2-year summary of the past conditions of approval. And we have Liz Stotts here, the homeless programs analyst, to make the beginning of the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Liz Stotts, as Ms. Broadison said. Where you know why we're here, the 2-year report on their conditional use permit. As you stated earlier, the conditional use permit requires PATH to report to the Planning Commission on its overall compliance with its conditions of approval. This includes a discussion on its operations, the number of persons served, complaints received about PATH's operations and the response to those complaints, as well as data on parking demand and utilization at the shelter. Just to remind council members, this is just to hear a report, and there is no action required from the Planning Commission today. Before I turn over the presentation to PATH staff, I wanted to give the Planning Commission a quick refresher on PATH and recap the highlights of the most recent reports before the Planning Commission. For a complete outline of the conditional use permit of PATH, it is provided on staff's report as Exhibit A. As you can see on the map here, PATH is located at 816 Cacique Street, and its off-site overflow parking is located at 110 South Quarantina. PATH's last presentation was in March 2021. During that report, PATH sought feedback from the Planning Commission on how to meet the conditional use permit requirement A9 regarding neighborhood communication, given that the community group specified in the conditional use permit became defunct in late 2018, making compliance infeasible. The Planning Commission suggested that PATH utilize the Santa Barbara Act on Homelessness Collaborative as a venue for neighborhood communication. SB Act hosts regional action plan meetings for neighborhoods highly impacted by homelessness and brings together residents, area businesses, service providers, and other community leaders to address homelessness in a coordinated and holistic manner. As recommended by the Planning Commission, PATH attends the East Side Neighborhood Regional Action Plan that is held every other Friday and specifically makes a presentation on its operations on a semi-monthly basis. Each year since 1999, PATH has received funding from the city to help support operations. Beginning late last fiscal year, city staff incorporated some of PATH's conditional use permit conditions into its contract, specifically the terms for neighborhood communication and outreach, as well as the neighborhood watch and patrol into the funding agreement between PATH and the city. This has allowed for consistent communication between city staff, PATH staff, and area businesses to identify areas of concern and identify improvements that can be made by PATH staff to ensure the presence of the shelter does not have negative impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. Currently, city staff from the police department, the city administrator's office, and myself are working with PATH to develop and implement action items that will reduce issues that continue to impact the area from people that are not always staying at PATH, such as loitering, encampments, and drug use. And staff is here to talk about that if the commissioners have questions. That concludes my presentation, and I just want to introduce who is here at the meeting. PATH staff, Elizabeth Adams and Jonathan Castillo, will be doing their presentation for PATH. Also in the room available to answer questions are myself, Barbara Anderson from the City Administrator's Office, as well as Commander Charles Katsapis and Lieutenant Chris Payne from the Police Department, and Rich Sander, who's the Executive Director of SB Act. And that concludes staff's portion.
Mrs. Barza, will you set up for the presentation, please?
Time is up. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So just a quick introduction to both who Liz and I are. Thank you for having us today. I'm Jonathan Castillo. I'm the Chief Regional Officer with PATH, which is synonymous for Chief Program Officer, kind of a confusing title. I've had the privilege of serving as the Acting Regional Director for the course of the past 2 years. Actually, Liz is now our Regional Director who's serving Santa Barbara in a full-time capacity. Sorry, Liz, I meant to let you introduce yourself. But that's kind of who we are, and so we're both up here putting this presentation on together as Liz has been with us for the course of the last 4 months now. So just kind of an update on the work that it is that we've been doing. As Liz Stotts mentioned, we are a low barrier harm reduction, housing first interim housing program, also known as SHELTER. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. We continue to operate 100 year-round beds that are funded through multiple partners, which include the City of Santa Barbara, Goleta, and multiple Santa Barbara County departments. Since we began, or since we started the merger, was completed in 2015, we wanted to provide a snapshot of the total number of people served since we've been in operations. Since 2015, we served 4,500 people. We've helped 650 people increase their income and have resolved homelessness for 626 people since we've been in operations. In terms of some updates since the last time we were here, we wanted to share that we've been doing a lot of work to improve the facility operations and sort of aesthetic for the people that we serve. As you may or may not be aware of, we prior to this building being committed for shelter use back when it was Casa Esperanza, it used to be a furniture location. And when the building was created, it always had kind of this non-very homey feel and kind of had a bit of an institutional vibe to it. We've been working really hard to actually to kind of change that based upon client satisfaction surveys that PATH completes on an annual basis, as well as SB Act completed a client satisfaction survey for people who are unsheltered in our community. And a lot of the feedback that we actually heard from that survey is that some of the barriers and challenges that keep people from seeking shelter has to do related to privacy, safety, feeling like they are welcomed and getting the help that they need. And so that's a lot of the feedback that we've heard over the years from not only the people that we serve, but partners in our community. And so, this past year, the past few years, we've actually got a number of renovations actually completed within our building that's working to be a more person-centered, holistic place that people will say, you know what, I want to be there. And so some pictures up here, as you can see some of the changes that we've done. If you've had an opportunity to visit our location, you might remember that this space that you see on this slide here used to just be open space. And so now what we're trying to do is make it a place where our residents can relax, can feel safe, can socialize, all within the presence of our own building, as well as be readily available so our case managers can continue to meet with them and provide them services. So we moved the computer lounge out into the main common area, which has allowed for more office space for our staff to actually meet individually with clients. And we've also updated our dining area. If you've had the opportunity to serve food in our dining area, we've had that dining area, I think, since back when Casa Esperanza was operating the building. And so we were having a lot of issues with just kind of ADA issues with the not being accessible for wheelchairs or tables collapsing and just having a lot of issues. So we were able to, through funding from the city as well as some private philanthropic giving, we've been able to really kind of improve the facility. Some of those changes include the women's and men's restroom, the dining area, and the common area. We still are working on a number of renovations to help sort of improve it, but we just wanted to make sure that you're seeing the progress that we're making so far. In terms of community-based programs, I know at the last 2-year report, there was some exciting news shared about some of our expansion that we're doing beyond interim housing. I think a lot of people know PATH primarily for the interim housing that we've been providing. But we do continue to operate rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing in a scattered site model. Both of those programs rely on, private landlords, and so the past conversation around needing more affordable housing, I definitely am grateful for some of the encouragement that went that way, because we see the biggest challenges that we have in resolving homelessness is that we're competing with folks who are probably a lot more desirable in terms of their employment and having a history of being a good renter that we're oftentimes sort of competing with. But those two programs actually work with private market landlords, where we provide both case management for the short-term and rapid rehousing and long-term case management in the permanent supportive housing program. A snapshot of some of the progress that we've made. As you can see on the first table, you'll see that there is a table that shows the number of people that we've served from last fiscal year to this past current fiscal year. And so you can see that there's been some consistency in terms of number of persons served. We've doubled in terms of income that we've increased, and housing placements were on a slight decline from the previous fiscal year. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the COVID funding and housing resources that were available during that time that we weren't able to sort of fully utilize during this current fiscal year. One thing I want to point out to you is the second table here is something that we really felt like was worth highlighting. I mentioned earlier that we've been making some strong attempts to make our facility and the services we offer a lot more welcoming, low barrier, harm reduction, person-centered. And our data is showing by our efforts to work stronger with the community by partnering with other homeless service organizations and outreach partners, we are serving a very different population than we were in 2017. You can see that we've had a steadily increase in the number of people that we're serving who are chronically homeless or have serious mental health needs. You can see that it's gone from serving 18% who are chronically homeless and 34% who have mental health needs in 2017 to now 61% in our present day and 53% have mental health. One thing I do want to point out is that mental health is self-reported, so we suspect that this number is much higher for people that haven't been able to access behavioral health care services. So the other thing I want to point out in terms of number of persons served, I know that in the past there's been some concern with PATH not serving as many as we have previously. What I want to point out is that the number of persons served has actually declined because it's a result of us being more low barrier and harm reduction. Under the old model, when somebody relapsed or somebody had a behavior because they were going through something that was traumatic or had something that was triggering for them, they might have had a behavior concern that was brought to the attention of staff, and they would have been exited from our program. Or if they were caught under the influence, they might have been exited from our program. Under our new model, we realize that does a lot of setting back for the people that we serve, and so we actually are very slow to exit people from our program now, because we want to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we can continue having them work with us, so we're slow to exit them from the program. So the 430, it's because we are aligning more with sort of best practices in the country. Community-based programs, I know at the last 2-year report out that it was shared, we were launching our outreach program. It took us a while to actually launch this program. I think it took us nearly a year to actually staff it, and a lot of it had to do directly with a lot of the challenges that I think our sector has been encountering with the Great Resignation. So it took us about a year to actually find the position. What we're excited to share about this position, though, is that it's helped us make leaps and bounds in terms of how we collaborate and work with the community. Our outreach focuses on the parameter that's identified within our CUP, which you can see on the outreach geography is on the 4th bullet point. Our outreach provides case management services. What does that mean? Typical outreach is typically offering people services. If they say no, then they move on to the next person. We actually help the individuals who are unsheltered get connected to the resource that they need to help resolve their homeless episode. Our outreach actually operates Monday through Friday during typical business hours, but it is important to note that they adjust their availability based on the needs of the people that we're serving. So sometimes that might mean that we're going out earlier in the morning or later in the evening time if we're trying to catch certain individuals that we're providing case management to. On the bottom here, I will share that in the course of the 9 months since we had hired our outreach specialists in September, we served 57 individuals, 38 that exited from the program, out of the outreach program, and 18 that moved into permanent housing. One of the things I want to highlight about outreach, the intent, or longer-term housing, the intention of outreach is not necessarily to permanently house. The intent of outreach is to get people connected to the resources that will help them move into permanent housing. Yet, our outreach specialist has helped people move directly from the streets into permanent housing, so it really kind of highlights the success of the outreach that we're actually doing. The other thing I kind of want to note is we have 38 people that exited the program, so if you're kind of wondering, okay, so what happened to the other 20? In the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the collaboration it is that we do, that when somebody leaves our geographic area, we make sure that we're doing warm handoffs to our other outreach partners and homeless services organizations to make sure that they're not falling through the cracks within our community and that we're getting them still connected and linked to the services that they need. Thank you. So in terms of other community updates, just want to kind of note that this is some of the enhanced collaboration that has gone on. We're working closer with the Santa Barbara PD in terms of challenges that we're identifying in the community. We're collaborating with safe parking programs when vehicular homelessness kind of is on the uptick within our community. We're now collaborating with service providers that have staff that speak Spanish to make sure that if we have folks in our community who are Spanish speaking, that we're able to serve them and language does not present as a barrier. We are also now collaborating with Be Well. Be Well has an outreach team that's mobile, and so we're able to better get folks connected to behavioral health services, as well as we're enhancing communication with our neighbors and stakeholders, where a lot of it used to primarily exist through making phone calls and doing emails. They now have a relationship with our outreach specialists and can text them or call them and make it a lot more sort of that neighborhood outreach model. We're continuing to follow our good neighbor policy that we make sure that we provide residents information on as we're admitting them. Our staff are making rounds in the immediate block to ask people to not loiter and to move on. And then we're still doing the monthly community cleanups. And that's a picture of our most recent community cleanup from earlier this month. In terms of our progress with complaints received, methods of communication, as I mentioned earlier, our outreach specialist has become a key communication mechanism for how we deal and respond to complaints. Our front desk is also providing a space for people to call to make complaints as well. Some of the themes that we've identified is there's a lot of loitering that occurs around the gas station. There's a lot of lodging around surrounding streets. Trash and litter tends to ebb and flow, and we work closely with the city on sort of resolving some of those challenges. Drug use and sales, and so when we see when issues are on the uptick and we're noticing certain trends, we collaborate with Santa Barbara PD to resolve some of those issues. And then, we also have seen that there on the complaint log that there's one party in particular where we get most or all of the complaints, and we're continuing to work with them. We also created a one-pager that we hand out to our neighbors that provides them resources on where they need to go when they're seeing issues. And so if a call warrants the need for 911 over us going out there, that they know what sort of situations require that as well. This is just a response to, I think, what some of the requests were from the last meeting, that you can see that we're continuing to respond to what was asked of us, which includes participating with SB Act as our stand-in meeting to enhance communication. And then, sorry, and this is the last page here of how we're continuing to respond to the request that you made at the last 2-year report. I see that I'm out of time.
Thank you so very much for this report. I just want to move forward with Mrs. Sparza to see if there's any public comment, either remotely or in our chambers today.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip in the back of the room and turn it to staff. Not seeing any movement on that, so I'll turn to virtual public comment. If there is anyone participating virtually on Zoom who'd like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands. We did receive written correspondence from Susie Kocher, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. And with that, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Chair Bonderson.
Thank you so very much. And before I open up the floor here to my colleagues, I just want to take a moment to let everyone know what our role is here today. We are going to focus any type of discussion on questions and comments that you may have. We're not required to provide any recommendations or directions to PATH. So with that, I will welcome any commissioner who would like to go first. That's interesting. It doesn't, oh, here we go. So, was that old? It might be, because I wasn't getting active. Hold on, let's stay in order. So Commissioner Wiscombe, you did hit your button first, so welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think you're making great progress. I've been through several of these updates and extra meetings, and you're making great progress, and we really appreciate it. I had a question about, I think at one previous commission meeting, we talked about you doing a monthly presentation to RAP and be available to the Planning Commission, and minutes, and that you take minutes. Have you been doing that? I kind of got the impression from the report that it's not every month, that there's only been 2 or something?
We present, we're there and present kind of informally at every meeting, and then we do a full formal presentation every other month.
Every other month, okay, so not every month according to this then, yeah, okay.
Correct.
And do you take minutes?
We do not, SB Act records the meetings, so we obtain the recordings from
Okay.
them. We did just learn that not all of the meetings have been recorded, though, when we requested all of the recordings, so.
Okay, okay. Is that something that you can correct? Is that something you can correct then, so that there is a record of you doing that?
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I just also wanted, oh, sorry.
Just before you go on, I just want to recommend that your mic is a little higher so we can make sure we hear you properly. Thank you.
Yeah, okay,
And
great.
I just wanted to comment that the recordings are actually publicly available on YouTube as well.
Right, right. I knew that. That's why I asked that we make sure that we make them available, so if planning commissioners or the public wants to watch them, they can. Okay. I think, I don't have a lot of other questions. I wanted to just address, we received public comment from Susie Couture, and yeah, you're nodding, I gather you know, because I see a lot of Marburg, on the call-in logs and email logs. So she talks about the challenges that they're facing on Cacique Street. So can you talk a little bit about that, or perhaps our officers that are here can address that if that's appropriate? I'm just, she said that we want to make sure that there are accountability mechanisms in their grant agreement to guarantee that they reduce the negative impacts of shelter guests on the surrounding businesses. And she cites Ramirez, who's been, I think, going quite a ways back as one of the ones that is negatively impacted, and Iron Horse, and then she mentions Marburg and the neighborhood. I want to ensure that PATH procures security for outside the facility for oversight of good neighbor protocols and for obvious safety reasons. So can you address that? Did you see this letter?
I did, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So we actually did look into the possibility of expanding the security company's presence. Unfortunately, what we were informed by the security company that no security companies can actually extend beyond private property. And so we have, unfortunately, because I think one of the suggestions that was made was to extend the security to the neighborhood block, but we unfortunately can't do that. And so, but with that said, we've continued to expand our security's presence in front of our property, in front of the building. But still, where the challenge lies is that people who are unsheltered and aren't clients of PATH, the only thing that we can do is encourage them to move along. But if they don't, there's not a lot of enforcement that we can actually do.
But can you, by your presence on a neighborhood block, for instance, a security present, is it uniformed security officers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if they're uniformed and they're actually patrolling blocks, doesn't that maybe deter some of the unsanctioned activities that go on?
Well, the security guards can't patrol the block.
They cannot.
Right, they can't go off of the private property. So they're outside.
Oh, they can't go off of PATH's
Right,
property.
right. And so
Okay.
we have offered to share the contact information if other businesses in the neighborhood would like the information to hire security for their sites as well, to offer that same outreach kind of on their properties. We do have our security guards patrolling in the front of our building and up to kind of the limits of our the limits of our property as far as they can go. And so there's like a wall outside on our property too that connects to the sidewalk. So they ask folks not to sit on that wall because it is our private property, as well as to help people clear from the parking lot and the outdoor area there. And we've also actually asked them to increase and do more rounds, just so there is that visible presence outside. So just in the past week, I think that's been, that we did ask them to increase that to try to help with some of these concerns that have been brought to us as well.
And when they confront someone that's sitting on a wall, for instance, do these people then leave and walk into the neighborhood? Do the majority of them do that, or do they just stay on your property?
Sometimes they move along. Sometimes they do.
You encouraging them to move along, or you are?
Yes.
So you're encouraging them to go into the neighborhood?
We tell them that they can't be in front of the property. We don't tell them where to go. The thing I was going to comment on is the biggest challenge that we actually have is that many times their response to us is, where can we go? And that's the biggest challenge that we have, because when you look at the data for people who are unsheltered in Santa Barbara, 64% of the 1,900 people are unsheltered. And so we just don't have shelter capacity. So the challenge that we're running into is we don't know where to tell them to go. And so we just tell them that they can't be in front of our neighbor's property.
Okay, so you do the best you can with the resources you have for the number of people that you can provide for. Okay, which I appreciate. I think it's great. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Madam Chair, just comment. Thank you for the presentation, and I think you're making really great progress from what it was when, we had the Milpas Task Force or whatever, and then the Milpas Community Association, and it was really confusing, and it was tough for PATH to operate in who do we answer to and what are we supposed to do? So I think that's been resolved now, and you're nodding your head, so, and I think we're moving in a positive direction, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. And I see we have Ms. Stott's light on. Did I say your name right?
Stotts, yeah.
Stotts, okay.
Yeah, thank you,
please go ahead.
Chair Bonderson. I just wanted to tag on to what Mr. Castillo and Ms. Adams have been saying. It is something that we're aware of as staff as well, the issues surrounding the neighborhood. And we're working with PATH to do the best they can to discourage people from loitering outside their property or for loitering in the neighboring property. Our PD can talk about some of the work they've been doing on enforcing misbehavior that happens in the area. They've really stepped up enforcement in those areas. So there's been some improvement. Their outreach worker works greatly with our police department to talk with them about people that are problematic. We have, as part of our RAP meetings, we do what we call focused case conferencing. So we talk privately. We're those of us that are authorized to discuss personal issues on clients. We talk about outreach plans and case management plans for individuals that are in the area that are not necessarily staying at the shelter or maybe might have been exited from the shelter but are just in the area that are in need of intensive assistance, and work together to try to strategize on how to work with those folks. We're also working with the City Administrator's Office on finding a daytime navigation center to give people a place to go. So we're actively looking for a site and working with SB Act as well on coming up with a place to give people to go during the day when they're asked to not loiter in front of PATH or at the neighbors.
Thank you for that, Ms. Stotts. I really appreciate that. That's a center would be really a marvelous asset, I think. That would really help for daytime. So I hope someday we have that.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with that comment as well. Next, we have Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions about overall operation of the facility. I understand the counts and the beds available have changed over time, and I understand that currently there's 100 beds available that can go up to 126 during inclement weather. So the 100 beds that are available year-round, I understand 20 are for Cottage Hospital, 22 are for behavior wellness, and the remaining 58 are interim housing. And I'm just trying to get to the 58 in terms of the math. So it was 2 to the City of Goleta, 7 to the City of Santa Barbara, 12 to County Housing and Community Development, and then there were others. I didn't have the specific numbers for Adult Protective Services, probation, and then just walk-in. So can you help me get to the 58?
Sure, yeah. So I believe the probation and probation, I believe, is 2 beds, and then the remainder is the sort of general beds.
And is there a specific number for Adult Protective Services?
That is on a, I think it's on a per diem use, and so there's not a specific amount of beds that they have, so no.
Okay, thank you. And then you did mention on one of the slides a bit about community-based programs, and in the staff report, I noted some data about increasing income of the residents at PATH. Can you share about existing or planned employment programming or other programming to increase income?
Sure, that's a good question. So there's actually some nuances around increasing income that I think that's also important to note. As I mentioned earlier in some of the data that I shared out earlier, we're serving like a higher population of folks with chronic homeless status as well as mental health. And so sometimes folks are actually coming into our facility that already have income established. So that's one case that sometimes we're seeing. So it's not that we're not increasing income. There's not income to increase because it's already been established. And then in other cases, we're working to support people with employment. We did lose our funding for employment since the last report out. But we're hoping to actually secure, with the next opportunity that arises, to see if we can secure employment back. However, we've established a partnership with an organization called 5 Keys that's actually been a wonderful partner. They're actually, they're co-located and work within our building. They have funding that they've actually received through Caltrans, and where they work with our residents to help them develop basic employment or soft skills around employment, and then they have an employment specialist that they actually work with during their time in that program that helps them to seek longer-term competitive employment.
In addition, just in the interim, while we're seeking out that funding to bring back our full employment program, we have worked with our case managers and staff who are on site at the interim housing site, that they work with our guests to create resumes and apply for employment and things like that. And then as well, we're working to bring back workshops. So kind of since COVID, we haven't been having a lot of in-person workshops on site. So related to employment, as well as to help bring people off of the streets and kind of hanging out on the sidewalk. We're working to implement more in-person workshops on site, one of which will be some employment workshops and like resume guidance and things like that.
That's great, thank you. A couple of other questions. I need to thank Ms. Stotts for explaining kind of the evolution of the many community groups that have been involved in the neighborhood outreach. And so I wanted to get a better picture of the groups that are represented in the East Side RAP. I understand that it's expanded much more broadly than the initial groups, which included, Casa Esperanza at the time, Community Kitchen, one in County Department, and a couple of City Council and City staff. So could you tell us, and this may be a question for Mr. Sander too, but can you tell us more about the different groups that are represented in the East Side RAP?
Yeah, it's probably.
Hi, yes. Commissioners, my name is Rich Sander. I'm the Executive Director of SB Act. The East Side RAP is with other service providers that are there on occasion. So sometimes it could be either CityNet, residents and business owners are often there. We do keep lists of actual attendees for each meeting, and so I'd be happy to provide that with you.
Great, thank you. I did just want to make sure that was residents and business owners in addition to other community partners, so I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Thank you. Another question for PATH, just given some of the concerns that were logged, I'm wondering if you can talk about either existing kind of community cleanups beyond the just once a month, like are there daily rounds every couple of hours for cleanups, or is that something that could be employed?
There are currently daily rounds that happen, so our residential coordinators and case managers will go out there. Our outreach worker goes out as well, and so we do cleanup as well as just kind of communicate with folks who are in the neighborhood. It's a great opportunity for our outreach staff to go out there and start some of those conversations, build those relationships, and try to get people connected to services. So that does happen on a daily basis throughout the day, that staff go out into the community and help clean up and have conversations with people.
I'll also just add about the program we're about to launch. I don't know if we have a name for it yet, but basically
Cash for Trash.
Yeah, Cash for Trash in collaboration with the city. We're working on finding ways to engage people who are unsheltered with being part of the solution. So that's something that we're looking forward to piloting in the upcoming weeks.
Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. we'll be out there having them help us clean up the neighborhood.
Thank you. Just one last question. Your presentation, you provide updates about renovations over the past couple of years. Can you share any anticipated enhancements to the existing shelter operations? You've mentioned a couple of programs, but anything else that you anticipate in the next couple of years?
Yeah, there's a number of things that we kind of have on our wish list that we're hoping to pursue. One of them is continuing the renovation. So we renovated the downstairs men's and women's restroom. We want to continue the renovations of the upstairs restrooms as well. We're looking at wanting to update our doors as well. We have very outdated doors that we're hoping to sort of revise with that are more ADA friendly and accessible in terms of, you know, having the button that you push. We are also looking at renovating the courtyard that we have as well. The courtyard is still a place that our residents love to hang out to. But we think that there's a lot more that can be done there to make it more welcoming and make even more people want to sort of hang out there that we also believe would then be an indirect solution or a direct solution towards decreasing some of the loitering that sometimes occurs with our residents who might be out in the front. However, I will note that in the work that we've done with our outreach specialists, we've learned that our residents are on the very small percentage of the folks who are oftentimes loitering in the neighborhood. We're also looking at sort of enhancing our camera and security system within the building as well. That's something that we've identified that there's some gaps around the property where sometimes we haven't been able to kind of answer some of the questions that have come up that we're hoping to do as there as well. And then we're hoping to continue to do some revisions eventually with our food sorting area, as well as a large office space that we have within the building that we know could be maximized for more staff, but has these really outdated cabinets that are attached to the wall that make the space nearly useless. So a lot of different updates that we're still sort of envisioning to make sure that we're kind of creating a place that's you know, that people are excited to be at.
Within the next year, we're also working to create some partnerships to create a rooftop garden. We have a rooftop area kind of connected. Right now, we can't do anything up there because we are missing a camera that views that, so just for security reasons. But once we have our cameras updated, we'll be installing a rooftop garden up there as well, and working with community partners to start a gardening program so we can have folks out there doing some gardening and growing beautiful flowers and vegetables and herbs.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you as well, Commissioner Boss. Next, we have Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Love hearing about the garden. That's very exciting. I think that's awesome. So I've heard very positive things about your outreach specialist. I believe his name's Odin, so congratulations on that. When was he hired exactly? Like, how long have you had that role in place?
August of 2022, but we put September because he spent about a month training in all of our different outreach programs throughout the state, but he actually launched the program in September.
That's great. And in what ways do you feel that that role has helped increase your relationships with your neighbors?
Sure. So before we had Odin, our neighbors had to call and email the front desk. And sometimes the staff that work the front desk oftentimes sort of rotate. And so it's hard for relationship building. But Odin, or our outreach specialist, I'll just call him Odin, everybody knows him by Odin, he has a persistent presence in the community that he's the neighborhood outreach guy, you know, and so everybody kind of just knows who he is. He's walking around the neighborhood all the time. So when the neighbors see him, they're able to say, hey, Odin, we're seeing this individual. And now we're running into a very unique issue where his presence is so well known with folks who are unsheltered in that area that he oftentimes has to tell people, I can't take you on yet. I can help you with short-term resources, but the case management, you know, because people know who he is and they trust him. And so I think that trust that he has with the people that we serve is the same trust that's been extended to our neighbors.
Yeah, really the ongoing presence of building the relationships, as well as just his ability to respond when complaints come. So if somebody calls, or we created an outreach phone number and email address that now comes to Odin, myself, as well as Odin's direct supervisor, so that immediately somebody can be answering the call or email and going to the location of wherever the complaint is so that we can try to deal with it immediately.
Sorry, I'll just also add one part that I feel like is important that I failed to mention is prior to Odin, when challenges in the neighborhood came up, the challenges were oftentimes not named or not numbered. And when Odin established his presence there, we were able to paint a fuller picture, to understand what was actually happening and going on out there. And so I mentioned the collaboration on that slide that we were doing earlier. That collaboration is because he truly understands what's happening outside. So now, you know, the very first thing he did is there was a broader assumption that everybody that was outside was a client of Path's. The first thing that we dispelled is that that's not actually true. And we already knew it in our heads, right? But we couldn't prove it. And so he was able to say, you know, X percentage are current residents, you know, X percentage. I think during the time when we were looking at the data, it was like 18% were residents. You know, it was 32% were past clients, but not current clients. And then there was this sort of ambiguous 50% that made up a number of just, we didn't know who they were, or they actually might have been confused for people that were actually in the labor line. And in some cases, we had our neighbors reporting on either our staff or our partners who they misperceived to be homeless. And so we were able to sort of paint that fuller picture. Then once we had that data, we were able to say, hey, you know, let's collaborate now with the city on sort of what we're seeing. And so we've been able to say, you know, Odin noticed, you know, a great example of something that was really simple was that there was an uptick in trash. And one of the things that Odin observed right away was that the uptick in trash that our neighbors pointed out had to do with a change that was made with the trash bin or can that was there. Communicated that with the city brought it back. It didn't eliminate trash, but it decreased the influx that was frustrating a lot of our neighbors, you know. So I think it was a lot of those little things of being able to actually kind of see it. You know, we saw that there was an uptick in vehicular homelessness at one point, and so we were able to reach out to our partners that we know who do safe parking programs. And so I think that's been like a big part of it, is we truly sort of understand what the needs are, what the challenges are, which allows for us to really kind of hone in on our interventions that we're doing with our partners.
That's great. I really appreciate the update. It's really good to hear, you know, the positive developments that you guys have had from that. I have a question for staff. In terms of the support that the city law enforcement and kind of our city partners in addressing homelessness provide, is there a way to help prioritize their surveillance or kind of interactions in the immediate vicinity of PATH, given kind of the feedback we're hearing that 50% of the folks that are potentially loitering are not PATH residents, and they don't really have the ability to help address that as much?
Yes, Commissioner Wardlow. We do have, as I mentioned earlier, some of that regional action plan meeting, the people that we're talking about, those, it's our top 10 of most difficult. Those are all people that are not staying at the shelter. Those are people that are in the area but are not at the shelter. So that's one step. Our police department is absolutely committed to that area and has increased rounds in that area. But we've also been starting to engage regularly with Ms. Adams and Mr. Castillo to address some of the issues that are still affecting the immediate neighborhood. And yeah, we're having, developing action items and things that we can improve. I wrote down a few things for like a camera on the roof so they can engage that. So those kind of action items that we're looking at. They already mentioned that immediately already rearranging the security guard to even just stand outside and discourage people from loitering. That was a result from our police department and myself and meeting with PATH and talking about some of those impacts. So we are also planning on meeting monthly to do check-ins and have PD offer their expertise on improvements that they can make to increase security around the area and address those issues.
Really appreciate your answer. It seems like a very collaborative approach that you all are taking, so thank you. That's the remainder of my questions.
Thank you as well. Next, we have Commissioner DeLucio, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised to see the unflattering letter, so I'm glad you addressed it to our satisfaction. I sort of did a site visit. I didn't have to disclose it. I had to go. I went to the post office at lunchtime at the Milpas post office as an excuse, just because I hadn't been over there to see PATH and the surrounding neighborhood. And actually, when I was approached to go in the post office, I did see individuals in front of Path. And then maybe 15 minutes later, when I also came out of the post office, they were still standing there. So is that what we're talking about here? Is there a camera that can see if people out front? Because I didn't see any security, and I did see the parking lot full of cars. And this was about maybe at 12:15. So I don't know if you can address that.
Yeah, we do actually have cameras that kind of face like the corners of the property, and we were excited to share that we just also placed another camera directly in front of the building as well to kind of to help with that. So yeah, I think what we try to do is we have different periods throughout the day that our staff actually go out. They leave the facility from their shift, or they don't leave their shift, but they go out and ask people to sort of move along. Our outreach specialist, in addition to that, as he's kind of going through, will ask people to move along as well. And, you know, as Liz mentioned earlier, now with having more security presence outside, that should be something that we'll be able to see and do, you know, quicker, so.
And it really varies kind of day to day too, depending, you know, how many staff we have on that day, what's our ability to make rounds, how often the rounds are made, kind of based on just our staffing for the day and the time of day. So it varies quite a bit. We try to stagger as well, like the times we're going out there, so it's not where people know like, oh, it's almost time, you know, for them to come and do their round, like scatter and then return kind of a thing. So we kind of try to stagger that as well. So it really varies.
And it was a peaceful situation. I just wanted to comment on that. And I think PATH is a wonderful organization. I know them from way back when in West Hollywood, actually. I think maybe it's one of the first places they established themselves. And actually reading this, the staff report and the documentation that goes back from 1999 up until, I think you took it over in 2016, I can actually see the improvement from when you took it over. So I do want to acknowledge that. And my final question would be, I know you have, just this presentation was very interesting, and I thought it was a really good presentation. So can you just explain to me, I know the funding comes from that, you get funding from the cities, Santa Barbara, other cities, the county, grants, et cetera. How, do you also get, are you set up with streamlining like a path? Is there like a higher path, you know, organization from which you get your modeling from? And what kind of resources do you get from them?
Sure. So our funding is, most of our funding actually comes through the county departments, through the county. We also get a good amount of funding from the city as well. And then, you know, we have funding through you know, a little bit of funding through the city of Goleta as well. In terms of our model, I think one of the unique perspectives that PATH brings is that we do operate in 5 different counties throughout the state, serving, I think, nearly 140 communities and cities throughout the state. And so a lot of what we tried to do is use our sort of statewide perspective to harness what we're seeing and learning throughout the state and see like how can we kind of create some of those best practices in each of the communities that we serve. And so, you know, I think Odin is a good example and testament to that. He's literally just kind of replicating all of the best practices that he spent a month sort of shadowing and being trained on, you know, from Santa Clara County to LA to San Diego County, seeing all of the good work that they were doing there, and was able to kind of bottle that product up and then bring it here. So we try to do that, and I think that's one of the things that I'm really excited with Liz's leadership, is that she's already pulling a ton of information from her counterparts in Santa Clara and in San Diego.
And I will add too, because you had brought up kind of the financial piece of it, that they, one great benefit of having the larger PATH organization is that they are able to help us fill some of those gaps while we look for the funding and find the funding that we need for things. An example of that is that we just recently implemented new pay brackets for our positions. So PATH thought it was really important to make sure that people were being paid what they should be paid, and did a 2-year compensation analysis across the state that just rolled out, and because of the importance to PATH to have good pay for their employees, before kind of knowing how we're going to really cover the costs, it rolled out. And so the larger PATH organization, is helping us with that as we search for and find funders to help us cover those costs.
Well, I'm glad to hear that's part of your success by having, the local resources as well as the larger organization. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since the PATH security person can't do anything beyond the PATH property, and since we have two police officers here today, I'd like to ask, I assume if there are issues, they devolve on the city police department, and I'm wondering how they get called into it, or is it just through coming by and observing what's going on? The police department acts as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Charlie Katsapis. I'm the commander of the Santa Barbara Police Department.
Sorry about that. My name is Charlie Katsapis. I'm the commander of the Santa Barbara Police Department. And Commissioner, to answer your question, just if I'm understanding it correctly, is what efforts are we making proactively in that area to address some of the public safety concerns?
Yes, and how do you get involved? Does somebody calls you because something's happening, or?
Sure. So there's a few ways that we get involved. Number one, the first way would be a call for service. So if someone were to see an activity that was causing them concern for public safety, they could either call 911 or a non-emergency number. That call would come in, and then our dispatchers would prioritize it based upon the nature of the call, and then we would send patrol officers out to address that issue. Another way that this can happen is that we have several proactive teams that are responsible for going out and doing work outside of calls for service proactively. So at the moment, we have two teams that are primarily focused on issues surrounding mental health and homelessness. Those teams would be our community action team. Our community action team is a team of 5 officers total. They ride on e-bikes or in a truck. They deal with issues surrounding homelessness and mental health proactively. So they may drive through the area as a normal day's patrol, which they do several times in the Cacique area. During those patrols, they might make contacts with people. They might do enforcement contacts. They might do educational contacts. They might offer resources based upon our partnerships with some of these organizations. And so that's another way that we get involved. An additional way we get involved is, as mentioned earlier, via the RAP meetings or community concern meetings. We'll come to meetings and we'll hear community concerns from either neighbors or from business owners or residents. We will then take those concerns, strategize what we call focused area patrols. So how can we address this concern for the long term? And then we will draw upon either our patrol teams or our community action team to go and deal with that. Another team that I forgot to mention that we do have is our co-response team, and that's actually pretty exciting for us. So co-response is a behavioral wellness clinician who's partnered with a police officer who address issues in mental health crisis. This is actually relevant now, but we recently were able to increase that team from 1 officer to 2, which is going to allow us to have 7-day-a-week coverage so that we can go out and proactively address issues of mental health and mental health crisis in that area, as well as other areas of our city. I don't know if you have anything to add, Lieutenant Payne, but in general, ma'am, that's kind of the way that we get called out in our approach to dealing with these issues.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing, Commissioner, the only thing that I would like to add is I was the supervisor of the community action team for the last year prior to being promoted. And during that time, I personally reached out to several of the local business owners to become a direct contact with those business owners. I've had lots of contact with Susie over the last year, and providing a direct source of contact for the business owners to try and resolve those issues, I think, helps cut out the middleman, and it clarifies the communication that we have to be ultimately responsive to the needs of the community and to the business owners in that area.
We also do neighborhood walks, so that's an opportunity, a collaborative neighborhood walk where service providers, the police department and the city as well as the county has participated. We can go out and walk and go into the businesses, business by business, to meet them, ask about any concerns or issues that they've been experiencing, so that we can, in that moment as well, kind of work together to address anything that we can implement to help with any concerns that they bring up to us.
Okay, well, thank you all. Commander, over the past year, have you seen a change in the amount of calls, or are conditions getting better or staying pretty much the same?
So, Commissioner, and to answer that question, if you look at our stats related to that area over the past few years, we have seen an increase in activity in the area surrounding Cacique in that neighborhood. Some of that is by our own accord, because we're now putting extra resource and effort to it, so it's generating more calls for service proactively. But there has been a marked increase in activity there. Some of that, as I said, is because we are now placing more effort there to ensure the public safety of that general area, and to be ultra responsive, as my partner said, to community concerns, and also what we're seeing firsthand in patrolling those areas.
Okay, well, was really glad to read about the addition of someone who knew how to handle people with mental health issues. I remember when I was first elected to the city council years ago, I went on a full shift, 8-hour ride-along. And at the end of it, after the various incidents that the officer I was with had to respond to, I concluded that you all have to be psychologists.
Yeah.
And these weren't, it wasn't issues in front of PATH or something, but it just, it's a tough job, but thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. And as I mentioned in the previous item, it's always hard to go last because my questions are already asked, and Commissioner Lodge took them both this time, both in the first item and the second item. But I do want to say I'm glad that Commissioner Lodge addressed the officers and not have you sit in the audience the whole time. It was nice to hear from you and to hear your feedback. It's wonderful. Thank you. And I also want to just say I'm so happy to see so much positive forward progress from PATH. You've made so much leeway since the last time we heard from you, and this is the right direction. It's what we want to see and hear, and it's wonderful. Keep up the good work. It sounds like you've made a lot of very active steps, not just one or two, but across the boards in all areas of the organization, and it's showing, it's paying off, and it's showing. Everyone needs an Odin, right? So it's good that you got him on board. It sounds like that has also made a big difference, and that's an important role that you want to keep the compensation, adequate, so you don't lose those types of positive positions that you've added. I'm sure for the both of you as well. We want to keep you around. I had two questions, both more curiosity related than anything else. What is the main reason you tend to turn individuals away when they're outside and they're not able to come in? What is often the main reason?
The primary reason why somebody would not be able to come into our shelter would be for behavior that poses, the primary reason that someone would not be able to come into our shelter would be for behavior that poses an imminent threat to self or others. And so if they are someone that has a history of violent or aggressive behavior that has created safety concerns for other residents and or our staff would be the primary reason.
And I'm assuming that's because you've had them in the facility before. They're no longer welcome to return based on their past behavior, not because you see something outside.
Correct. I mean, yeah, that's one of the primary reasons. A few other reasons could be things where maybe they are not willing to release certain items that they have in their possession, such as weapons or paraphernalia or belongings that exceed our capability to take in.
But really, the number one reason we turn people away is just because we're full and we don't have the capacity. So if we had more capacity, we would take them. It's a very small number that Jonathan's talking about that that can't come due to the behavior or possessions.
That leads directly into my other question. Do you have any plans, kind of in your trajectory of the future, to increase capacity? And
have
if so,
dreams.
I mean, I know it's a dream, but is there any plan or any goal, either physically or fund-wise, for you to do so in our community?
In terms of shelter capacity or
Yeah,
just, yeah?
beds and being able to
yeah.
serve more people.
Yeah. I think that the number of beds that we physically have within our building sort of is what we have, and so we're limited by physical space. But we do have a desire to deepen our services more. Because of that data that I shared earlier, the 18 to 64% are now chronically homeless, the 34 to 53% now have mental health needs. We really want to expand our service model to be more robust so we can actually meet some of those needs, whether that's through us expanding our service model directly as PATH or even enhancing collaboration as well.
I'm so pleased to hear that, because we know that there's an increase in our homelessness issue, especially, during the pandemic. It really brought it to the surface, and we can't seem to keep up with how we serve them. So it's nice to hear you have a goal in mind. Hopefully it'll come to fruition as well in the near future. And my final question, again, a curiosity question, is what is your absolute top priority for your next funding cycle? What would you like to improve on first? Would it be your security? Would it be something else you've mentioned here today?
I think I'll go first and then.
Maybe there's two answers.
Yeah, I think our primary goal is so PATH has been operationalizing our shelters using the same primary funding since Casa Esperanza was operating the facility. We've changed a lot of the way that we actually operate to engage people who are more vulnerable, and good example of one of the changes that we made under Casa Esperanza's model. They used to ask people to leave during the day. And that's a common practice for a lot of providers that don't have the staffing capacity to have people there during the day, right? Because it takes more people to kind of, be there. So we actually got rid of that rule back in 2018, where people can stay during the day, but that adds additional needs for our program. So I think one of the things that we really want to do is we really want to increase our funding for our shelter operations to make sure our services are more robust. And like Liz mentioned earlier, this compensation analysis that we completed, it really highlighted that there is a pay inequity that exists amongst homeless service providers, not just PATH, but homeless service providers. And it is very, very challenging, and many of our staff are on the brink of homelessness. And one of the things that always breaks my heart is with a lot of our employment programs, when a lot of our clients gain employment, sometimes they're making more than our staff that got them the job. And so what we are really hoping to do is to increase our funding for our shelter operations to make sure that we can bring on more staff to provide those quality services. But to also, because PATH took kind of like a step of faith by increasing compensation for our staff, even though like our funders aren't there yet to kind of meet us there. And so this is something we're kind of doing throughout the state. So we're kind of, reaching out to our funders saying, hey, we kind of stepped out here. Can you meet us where we're at to make sure that this is not something that is going to become sort of a deficit and compromise the organization?
I applaud you. It will come back in spades, and I strongly believe that. I hope I'm not wrong. I think it was the right thing to do, because you want to keep the wonderful staff that's brought you so far. And did you want to add anything? I don't want to cut your time short.
No, the only thing I would add is just, I think we've already touched on it, but just continuing to improve the site itself to just make it more comfortable so that the folks who are there are able to more fully engage, because they're feeling that they're in a calming kind of healing space.
That's wonderful. I'm so pleased to have you here today, and I personally really appreciate the presentation and your comments and feedback. It just feels like this sector is moving in the right direction for our community because we need it so desperately. Thank you both for being here. Thank you to staff, to the officers. And with that, I will close this item. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And moving right along to our administrative agenda, we do have committee and liaison reports today, and I will begin with our staff hearing officer liaison report. If Commissioner Boss, do you have anything to present?
I do not today.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioners that have any presentations today? Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, Ms. DeBusk, were you going to say anything about the appeal and the decision on Tuesday? Oh, okay. Yeah, last Tuesday, the City Council heard the appeal on the Marburg project that the Planning Commission had approved between Quarantina and Cayo Cesar Chavez and the railroad tracks. And they unanimously denied the appeal.
The door's open, I can't hear you very
Oh.
well. Do you mind just going
Yeah.
closer to your mic? Sorry. And perhaps when you leave the room, would you close the door? Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
The City Council, at its hearing on Tuesday, unanimously denied the appeal on the Marburg project. That's all.
Thank you for the report, and it's nice to get an update here as well. Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's a request, but the Downtown Parking Committee this morning heard an update on the CBID, the Central Business Improvement District. Okay, getting my acronyms right. And I think it may be helpful or beneficial for the full commission to get a presentation when we get later on down the line.
Thank you, and I don't see anyone else's light on, so I will quickly add one item from ABR. It was seen on August 21st. It was for final approval on a project that I have presented before at 2020 North Lacumba Road. Just to quickly remind everyone, this is a project that consists of a demo of all existing commercial buildings on site and the construction of a new 48-unit multifamily residential development. And it uses, well, I should just say it as it's written, as a 100% affordable development under the state's density bonus program. Unlimited density is allowable, along with exceeding the height limitation of the zone, which is 45 feet. The project proposes a density of 38.71 units per acre, maximum height of 53, 71 vehicular parking spaces, along with 10 designated guest parking were proposed. This project requested final approval back in October, and it was granted project design approval back in October of 2022. So the motion was to provide final approval with comments and that staff verified the modifications that had come forth during this hearing. I also just wanted to mention that since I last presented, the State Street Advisory Committee has met not once but twice. They scheduled their second meeting quite quickly after the first one as a speedy update, kind of to keep the momentum going, and they had a meeting last Wednesday, September 6th. So if anyone's keeping up with that, the recording is now online, and you're welcome to watch if you're interested. And that's all I have today. I don't see any lights on at this time, so I will go ahead and adjourn our meeting with the reminder that we plan to see each other next Thursday, September 21st, and have a wonderful day. The meeting is adjourned at 4:14 p.m.